We're ready to begin our meeting. Thank you. So welcome to the Thursday, August 11th, 2022 Town of Monroe Planning Board Workshop meeting. Noreen, if you would please take roll call.
Connie Franson.
Present.
Jeff Manson.
Here.
Pat Shea.
Here.
Nick Napoli.
Here.
And Steve Thaw.
Here.
Thank you.
With that, I'll point out the exits. They are in front of me, to your, behind you. One over here to my left, the entrance that you came in, and another over here that leads out into the patio. With that, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. All right, with that, new project, first item on the agenda, if they're present, is Owen Drive. Do we have anyone here for Owen Drive? I don't believe so. All right, so that is going to be moved to then agenda next month. Yeah. And so we do have a returning project. The first one will be Homeland Towers and Verizon Wireless. And just a note, if you're here for 3.2 Pilati Village, that has been moved to next week's agenda, next Tuesday. So that will not be on the agenda this evening. So Homeland Towers, good evening. Good evening. So would you, enter your name into the record and provide us an overview of where we are?
My name is David Kenny. I'm an attorney with Snyder & Snyder. I'm here tonight to represent the applicants Homeland Towers and Verizon Wireless. I have with me Vincent Xavier, Vice President of Homeland Towers, to my right.
Not quite. I'm actually the regional manager. I have not gotten a promotion quite yet, but thank you.
It's in the works. We're here tonight to represent the application for a wireless telecommunications facility that's to be located at 2426 Strauss Lane. The facility is proposed to be 100 feet tall to support the equipment of Verizon Wireless. Verizon Wireless has a need for a facility in this area to remedy service issues, gaps in service, as well as capacity issues. We have an application currently pending before the town board, zoning board of adjustment, zoning board of appeals, so that we can get an approval for being located out of the utility overlay district. There is not an ability to locate the facility within the utility overlay district. Therefore, we need a use variance for that approval, and we're currently pending a review before that board. When we met with the board, they had requested that this board, part of its review as the site plan review, as well as the review by being located in the Ridgeline Protection Overlay District, for this board to be declared lead agency. If this board would choose to accept that, we would like this board to declare its intent to be lead agency tonight. We've also received some comments. We know the town, through the ZBA, has retained a wireless consultant of Cityscape to review the wireless,
And I'm just wondering
Sure.
about the name. Is Cityscape?
Cityscape.
Because I know Cityscape Cultural Resource Investigation. I didn't know there was a FAA.
They must be different entities,
Okay.
but Cityscape Wireless, so they're a professional consultant for the town. They're reviewing the wireless radio frequency information that we provided as part of our application. They've determined there is a need for the facility, and we have chosen a reasonable location for the facility because we could not be located and address the needs for the service from the utility tower overlay district. We did receive some additional comments from the town's engineer. We are working through those comments, but one of the comments and one of the things we'd like to focus on tonight is the visual aspect of this facility. So what we're proposing to do is called a balloon test. We're going to float a balloon about 100 feet in the air. That's the proposed height of the tower. And we're going to take photos from various areas around the town to document the visibility of the tower to see where this tower is actually visible from. I have with me tonight, and this was included in the first submission to the board.
Is this something that's been discussed with the ZBA, the
Correct.
balloon? Okay, because we haven't been part of the protocol discussion to date, or have we? Okay, no, but just, so I guess the question is typically with cell towers, the wireless section, and I know ours is different and older, you know, it would either be part of seeker or it would be part of the application. So I guess we should discuss the protocol because we would establish it, correct? Okay. I just want to understand
Absolutely, that's one of our focuses tonight. I have actually with me a handout for the board. So what we prepared was viewshed maps that show, based on a computer algorithm, where the tower is likely to be visible from. This takes into account topography, vegetation, and building. So I have these tonight. I'm going to pass them out to the board.
And you did submit a visual impact assessment already, the viewshed maps?
Correct. These, when I get to the mic.
Okay.
What he's handing out now is actually what was part of our original application, the viewshed map there.
Okay, so it's slightly different, looks like it's on a different base map.
So there's been
Oh, there's two,
yeah,
actually,
There
yeah.
should have been two. This is the representative of the second one. The
Okay.
only difference is that we have yellow dots on this map, the one I've just handed out, and those are the proposed photo locations. So what we've done is the blue shaded areas on this map is where the tower is expected to be visible from. Now, if you notice, there's not many blue areas on this map. That's generally a lot more blue on these maps, but due to the fact that the tower is relatively low height at 100 feet and the vegetation topography of the area is actually going to limit a lot of the views of this facility. However, to verify that that's actually representative of the visibility of this tower, we're going to have the balloon floated and take the photos from around these photo locations. So our goal tonight is, based on your local knowledge, if you have any additional viewpoint locations that you would like us to add, we'd be happy to add them to this, this map. And also, this isn't the only bite at the apple. When we do the balloon float, we're targeting a September 5th or a week of the September 5th float. We can have any input up until the day of the float. So if there's an additional viewpoint location that maybe doesn't come through tonight or is thought of later on, if you email us, we can absolutely add that while we're out in the field taking the photos.
I guess fundamentally, what was the methodology used to create the visual impact assessment? Because we have the handouts, but usually there's a methodology that says, you know, on leaf, off leaf, you know, how it was modeled. And so that I and the board have a sense of whether the areas that it's theoretically visible from are actually representative.
At the bottom right-hand corner of the map, it has a note. It talks about how the viewshed map is taken into the land cover conditions. So it's basically, it's not representative of winter leaf-off conditions. It's land cover, full conditions. However, what our team has done already, we knew that this would probably be timed in the summer. So during the winter months, we went, and Mr. Xavier actually personally did this, went around and took photos from these photo locations during the leaf-off season, so that we would be able to, in the final result of the balloon test, which is the visual resource analysis report, would be able to include a representation of both leaf-on and leaf-off conditions.
Yeah, that's correct. If I could just add, so the blue itself is where there would be potential direct visibility. There are potentially other areas where you would see it through trees. That wouldn't be the blue areas. The blue areas you see here is where there's potential direct visibility with the existing terrain. And that's why the additional photos and your input on those are important, because we're going to, you know, focus on other areas to make sure that even indirect visibility is taken into account.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is you have a bare earth condition overlay. It says identifies areas where the proposed telecommunication tower high point may be visible. But you then have the land cover condition viewshed area includes a screening effect of intervening vegetation and buildings. And if you look at the legend, the blue is the land cover viewshed area.
Correct.
Oh, so what would be the bare earth?
The first one that we gave you, so that one did not have the photo locations, but when our initial submission, we had two maps. One was the bare earth and one was the land cover.
Your initial submission, do you mean not this evening, but the ones that were
Correct.
recently submitted?
Correct.
Because-
They were the ones that, they don't have the photo locations on there, but they have the blue based on what the predicted visibility would be based on the computer algorithm.
Maybe I'm not looking at the right maps. The ones that I have, the two, say land cover, not bare earth. Am I? Yeah, the blue there is land.
Bare earth, there'd be like two different shades of blue. If you don't have that, we can supplement that to you immediately so you can review that before any float.
Yeah, I mean, I think we only have land cover.
That's all I
So
have.
we're not actually seeing then the full extent, in other words, bare earth would be no vegetation. So that's not obviously the full extent of visibility, but there may be places that are not showing up here during off-leaf conditions, which is why you would compare the bare earth to the land cover.
Not necessarily, because again, the bare earth isn't leaf-off conditions, it's no vegetation
Correct.
whatsoever.
That's like the worst case.
Exact- well,
That's just topography.
It's almost an impossible case because
Correct.
we're not all taking down all the trees in the buildings. But again, the point of this map is really to kind of look at where recommended photo locations should be for the ultimate visual resource analysis, which we can supplement with a bare earth cover if you'd like. But I think what these do is they kind of predict where it may be visible. But again, that's why we're taking photos from several locations that don't have any blue, because we're trying to make sure that we can verify where it's actually going to be visible from. And
I feel like it's a little premature to select viewpoints if we don't have one piece of data.
I respect that, and I wouldn't even expect you all to look through this and give me the viewpoints right now anyway. I'll commit to have a bare earth view shed to you by early next week at the latest, and then if you can review that and just email us back with any comments you may have.
Well, so I think we have to talk about the protocol for this. Well, first of all, we need to do seeker. So we're going to have to do a notice of intent, declare intent to be lead agency, and then the visual becomes all part of this. I feel like we're kind of right now on a train that we can't stop by you telling us that it has to be September 5th. Okay.
it's just a suggested date.
Okay.
We absolutely can be more flexible with our date. We're trying to be more collaborative with this. So if you feel
appreciate
that
that.
we're throwing down the train, we can absolutely stop the train.
Okay.
We can slow it down. We're willing to work with you guys. Ultimately, we want to have a balloon test and a final visual analysis report that this board feels is accurate with what the actual
Right.
visibility will be.
Yeah, because in fact, it's definitely on one of the high points in the town. It is within I think the Ridgeline Overlay District, which
Right.
was specifically, identified as a area to protect. So you're placing it right in the area that, is one of the most sensitive visually. So, I don't want to take the analysis lightly and be reactive. So from my perspective and for the board's benefit, I think we should get a copy of the visual impact assessment with the bare earth and have both of those on the map. And then within that area, we can consider, how your suggested locations, whether they're reasonable and if we need to add anything to that. I know Saratoga Associates, they do this a lot, so it's not that, they haven't probably done a good job to begin with. But again, I think everybody wants to be able to look at all that information in totality. Plus, the opportunity is, as residents here, our board may know of locations that would be of concern. Whether it's a historic site or a recreational area, there may be additional viewpoints from which to take a photo, just to verify it will or won't be. The other concern, of course, is that we're doing this during on-leaf, because we're not going to be to off-leaf until November, probably. So all of that will somehow have to be taken into consideration. but you said you did take, photos during off-leaf, so that'll help. Okay.
Yeah, and just to your point there, even if the bare earth model with the different overlay doesn't show color in a certain area, and you know of a historic property that we may have missed, we do intend to cover all of those with viewpoints, or even just a specific address now. You don't necessarily need the map to tell us that. If you know of a certain spot you want anyway, just tell us, and I don't care if it's shaded or not. We'll
Right.
send our team there to take the photo.
Okay. In addition to visual and seeker, was there anything else you wanted to, in particular, have the board address this evening or attempt to address?
Not this evening. I think we still have some comments we received from the town engineer that we're working through, and we also have worked through some of the comments we received from Cityscape. I think we would just like to confirm that the planning board will also be using the services of Cityscape as part of their review.
Okay. So let's do this. We'll go to our town engineer for his consultants. We'll ask our planning board attorney for comments, and then we'll go through the board as far as comments, and then we'll talk about seeker and the visual and kind of have a path forward with this. Thanks.
So for this evening, I just reissued my previous comments that I prepared for last month that the applicant was unable to attend. I kind of want to focus on one bigger item that I had noticed from the plans. After reviewing the fire code with the building inspector, the access drive is 1,200 feet long or so, which by the fire code, Ben and I believe that a 26-foot wide access drive has to be constructed in order to access the site. Currently, what's proposed is 12-foot wide. The applicant has prepared a response, and we just received today a plan that Ben and I are going to review with the fire district to see if they're comfortable with potentially reducing that amount, since the fire code does give a little bit of leeway to the jurisdictional or person having jurisdiction to potentially reduce that amount. So we will be reviewing that next week. And that's kind of key because currently what's proposed, a SWIP would not be required since the disturbance is less than an acre. However, more than likely with the amount of grading that would need to be in order to accommodate the 26-foot wide road, and a SWIP could potentially be required.
So we have a lot of lay people in the audience this evening. Just
Sure.
mention what a SWIP is.
Oh, sure. It's a stormwater pollution prevention plan, so it helps mitigate erosion and sediment control during construction and after construction. So the site is accessed via Strauss Lane, which is currently a private road with 2 residences on it. So we're also looking at whether or not some kind of private road maintenance agreement will be, if there's not one, that should be required, as well as how the town code views a private road with more than one access off of that private road, and how that should be improved. There's an existing culvert proposed where the access drive comes from the cell tower. That should be analyzed to make sure that that's sized properly. We spoke about view shed. There were some lights proposed. I think they were at 4,000 Kelvin. Generally, the board likes to see those LEDs at 2,700 Kelvin or less. Rock was identified to be pretty shallow, so just trying to understand if blasting or rock excavation is going to be needed. Looks like there's a long-eared bat, so that mitigation will have to be proposed. And that's it.
Did you mention something about topography, or is there? I haven't seen topo on this set. There
was a grading plan.
There is a grading plan.
Yep.
Okay. Ashley, do you have comments?
So as far as seeker goes, you touched on it a little before. It would be an unlisted action under seeker. You would be able to declare your intent to be lead agency this evening and circulate a notice of intent. They've identified the ZBA as an involved agency. I believe that is it. It will also need to go to the county for GML review as well. The property is, as you noted, in the RPO, the Ridgeline Protection Overlay, so I think it would be helpful if you could submit some type of narrative going through those RPO regulations and how the project's going to be designed to fit within those. You're going to be removing some trees, so you will need to submit a tree plan. That's in the town zoning law, there's tree preservation law. I think the submission mentioned that there's going to be some painting or other stealthing techniques, so this board will want to definitely see whatever you're proposing in that regard and as part of their architectural review. And one more thing, which I had discussed earlier with the attorney for the project, that the cell tower federal regulations allow an increase in height as of right after something's already constructed. So I'd ask that the visual analysis also account for that, even though it's not being proposed at that time. But that way you are sure that you have a complete picture of what could potentially in the future be there.
Accommodate that in the visual analysis report. And I just wanted to touch on one comment regarding the width of the access drive. We absolutely want to make sure that there is a safe and adequate access for emergency vehicles in fire department. We're just trying to do a balancing act, as the more we widen it, the more trees that'll have to come down, and I know that that's an aspect that we want to reduce and minimize as much as possible. But we'll work with the town to make sure that whatever driveway plan we have provides safe and adequate fire access.
Okay. I agree with that. I think there has been, this requirement to put in 26-foot wide drives in many instances, and I think to the extent that we can limit that, that would be good, because really this is, I think, a couple houses and a cell tower.
Right. So Ben and I discussed that, and we're looking at the code from basically that's what it requires, but like I said, it does give some latitude, but we don't want to go for that latitude unless the fire department says yes or no. So that's kind of where we're at. We want to make sure that the fire department's on board with, where we take that access road.
Okay. Yeah, because that's really a pretty wide 2-lane road, when probably that's not necessary, when we could do something limited with turnoffs if necessary.
That is exactly what we actually proposed. We proposed several turnoffs in a bigger area at the end for them to turn and park.
Right, because it's mostly unmanned. The real time that you're going to need, I think, any width of road is to actually construct it and get construction vehicles up there and the actual pieces. So, that would be the extent of really the full use or the most use of any kind of drive that's put up there. So for whatever reason, my plan set didn't have a grading plan. Yeah, so I don't know if it was sent digitally. I haven't looked at it may be there digitally, but I don't have a hard copy. So if I could get.
We can definitely resend it digitally. There should definitely, it's one of the pages in the full set. You look at the bottom, there's a profile showing the grade.
Oh, talking to the mic, please.
It definitely should have been there. Otherwise, we
Yeah.
can definitely resubmit to you electronically.
Okay.
He'll bring up what page it's on. You'll see at the bottom there's a profile of the access drive, and it should have been on every set.
C2.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so I did see this, but some of the enlarged maps don't have topo on them. I think we need, in general, more topo on the maps.
I think some of the pages intentionally omit the topo because it gets muddy with all of the lines. I don't know if we need that on every page, but if you want us to add it onto.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to extend out for context, just a little farther on either side of the road, and I definitely think that within the equipment area. Again, you're going to be probably, you're going to grade to get the equipment in, you're going to grade to put it up, and just need to see something at that enlarged scale. Great. Okay. Fire lane, SWIP, we'll see what happens. Of course, color, we'll have to discuss, and whether or not there's some kind of stealth design that we could consider. I don't know, we'll have to figure out the height relative to the trees, and see whether there's anything nowadays that is better design for a stealth technology.
What we're proposing, what we've seen is probably a better stealth design for these types of locations, is actually painting the pole brown and just keeping it as a slender brown monopole. By doing that, the brown against the wooded trees, it usually kind of blends in and adds a certain stealth design. Other types of stealth designs that you may hear, like a monopine or a tree, it actually adds more mass, and some people, as you know, you have to get above the tree height to have the actual service be propagated. So usually it looks like a tree that kind of sticks out a little bit 30, 40 feet taller than the tree line. And we've had some municipalities actually prefer the painted brown monopole because of the way it can blend in with the trees in the background and have less mass in the air, so there's less things to see.
Yeah, I think we'd have to look at it from the perspective of the canopy, because I've been in locations where the canopy is not necessarily uniform, and so you may have some evergreens that pop out, some deciduous trees that pop out, so it wouldn't look as if you have, a single kind of tree line with a bump up and then out. It actually is varied enough that it's not, a concern. The other thing I've seen done in the town that I do work for is, in reviewing one, they actually did a pole, and it didn't have any of the antenna on the outside. It was all internal, but that affects the ability to co-locate.
It also affects the service. So and I'm getting into radio frequency engineer testimony now, but what the service usually does, what they're looking for now, is to have these units called radio heads be located directly next to the antenna. And that seems to reduce latency, reduce noise, and it provides a better service experience. When you have a covered unipole, what they call it, and you have the antennas inside, the radios actually give off too much heat that they can't put them inside of these. So they usually, for those types of facilities, will have the radio heads located at ground level and connected by a cable. That length of that cable creates latency, and it's a worse design technologically. But we can absolutely explore it. I think the visual analysis report is probably going to be the best time to discuss.
Permanent, yep.
Yeah, when the stealth design would be best.
Okay, I agree. All right, so let me see if our planning board members have any comments. I'll start to my left. Nick?
Nothing now. No comment.
Jeff?
I have a couple of questions. Taking a look at what you handed us tonight. So help me understand a little bit more about how this is our third application in the last couple of years from Verizon to locate additional facilities within the town. But it's the first one, I believe, from Homeland Towers. So we have different entities representing Verizon or acting as vendors for Verizon, I gather, that are putting these facilities up or proposing to. I know we have an approval on one, and just looking at the radius of your map that was approved about 1 2/3 miles from here on top of the professional building. So can you speak to me a little bit about how this all works, what your interaction with Verizon is, and how that relates to these other entities, and why are we seeing more and more of a need to have more and more facilities to deliver the service that we're looking for?
So I'm with Homeland Towers. We're a real estate developer that focuses on telecommunications infrastructure. My company builds, owns, and manages these assets. We're not a vendor for Verizon. We don't work for Verizon. Verizon is simply our co-applicant on this. Sometimes Verizon is not our co-applicant. We'll go in with T-Mobile or AT&T. So we're completely distinct entities. Sometimes, yes, Verizon will come in, especially if it's a rooftop site where you don't actually need new infrastructure. Verizon maybe handle that themselves. They'll go through, get the approvals, they'll just put their equipment on the existing building, and that's it. So there is no direct corporate relationship between me and Verizon. As far as why you are going to see the need for more and more of these, I don't want to get into too much because when it comes to public hearing or even before, we'll have the RF engineer come in who can speak more intelligently about that than me. We did submit an RF report with this, which tells, specifically asks you to look at sections that deal with capacity and the coverage maps themselves, because if we could have just located an utility overlay district, we would have, because you want to go the path of least resistance. In this instance, Verizon's already there, and even being there, there's still gaps in service. And when you're on top of a rooftop, you're going to have relatively low height, which means the signal itself is not going to propagate far. The technology itself is a line of sight technology, meaning, everything that's between you and it is going to degrade the signal, even leaves, but obviously mountains and other buildings as well. So generally, you want to have the antennas be at a point above the tree line or any immediate structure or vegetation that is going to cause signal degradation. The closer, I try to explain it like this. If you had a fire hose or any kind of hose, if you put your finger close to the water, it's going to block more of the water. If you put your finger further out, less of it's being blocked. It's the same situation here. So you need to be above the immediate tree line area in order to provide the coverage that you need in a greater distance. And like I said, an RF engineer is going to be able to speak to that better, and I would just encourage you to have those questions with him. But as far as a relationship, yes, this may be Homeland Tower's first application in this town, but it's not our first application we've done in this area. We generally, at least 60% of our deals are actually with municipalities on municipal property. We can show you a list of all the municipalities we've dealt with in Orange, Westchester, Putnam, et cetera. Does that answer your question?
It helps, yes.
But maybe this will help clarify. So I do represent Verizon Wireless. They are a co-applicant as part of this application. Verizon Wireless has dictated to Homeland Towers that it had a need for a site in a certain area. Homeland Towers helped find a property that would be within that area. But the need for the facility comes from Verizon. The location of the facility comes from Verizon. Homeland Towers is going to provide the infrastructure for Verizon, but it's really been dictated from Verizon's radio frequency coverage maps and directing them for the area where they need a facility. There is a capacity need for this facility, so part of the reason you're seeing more facilities go up in the area is more people are using their cell phones. Your cell phones are being used for more and more things. It's not just giving a phone call anymore. The video chats, the emails, all of that is more data, and it increases the capacity that's being put on the network. So we need more capacity to relieve that additional kind of the data compression and to be able to provide additional bandwidth so that there can be more communication.
Yeah, but just to piggyback on that a little bit, I don't want to focus on capacity too much because this is actually a site that needs new coverage as well. You'll see from the maps that there's an existing gap in reliable signal here. In addition to the capacity issues, there's actually a true gap here. And if you drive through the area, the gap is pretty obvious. Just me driving through, taking the pictures and everything, you can see that there is a true gap in service itself, coupled with capacity issues in the area as well.
Thank you, I appreciate that. The use variance that you're going for with the ZBA, is that simply because you're outside of the overlay for cell phone towers, or does it also address the ridgeline protection issues, or ridgeline protection is going to be all handled here at the planning board?
Ridgeline protection is all handled by the planning board. It doesn't create an additional variance. It's just an additional set of criteria that we have to review as part of this application.
I think that's it for
I think depending on the standards of the ridge protection overlay, there theoretically could be a variance, but it'd be an area variance, possibly.
Wanted to
Yeah.
vary any of those regulations, or if there was something that's
Those
required that
standards,
they
right.
can't meet.
Right. Pat, do you have any comments?
I don't.
Okay. And you're not on this application at this time. Thank you. A couple of other things. Do you have drop call records or records as to, again, demonstrating the gap? I know there are some submissions we've seen where they actually submit, again, drop call information.
So we had a key performance indicator data, which is like it's a graph that shows how often the usage goes, and it has a percentage of the capacity. This is all in Michael Crosby, the radio frequency engineer for Verizon. We submitted that report as part of this. So in that report, there is KPI data that shows the capacity being exceeded by certain surrounding sites.
So I'll take a look at that because I saw one of the submissions. The other is other locations to co-locate. Some of the maps show other antenna and or monopoles. Are those homelands or is that every site? Because we've approved, I think, at least 2 co-locations recently. One over by Route 17 and the other, wasn't there a second one?
Tower, Bar Lane.
Okay, that's right, over by Home Depot in that area. So Homeland Towers, who are you specifically representing in terms of a carrier, or is there a carrier you're representing? And then the second question is, we have high tension utility lines and we have other tall structures in the area, and have those been inventoried and checked to see whether or not you couldn't co-locate on any of those, even if it meant 2 locations as opposed to 1?
So first, so Homeland Towers and again Verizon Wireless are co-applicants. It's not Homeland Towers representing Verizon. I, as the attorney, am representing Verizon and Homeland Towers. But the surrounding sites that are in the report are surrounding Verizon sites that they have. And the need for a co-location was reviewed. It was determined there wasn't any co-location opportunity. Cityscape also reviewed our submissions on this and confirmed. If there's additional sites or things you want us to review, we'd be happy to. But as far as...
I'd like to see that information as far as, because it wouldn't be just Verizon, it'd be other, if it's mobile, T-Mobile or anybody else that...
No, I meant the surrounding sites that are shown in the report are Verizon sites to show where their coverage is. That's the sites that are shown in
For
the report.
Verizon, right.
Correct.
But for co-location, we would want to see all the sites around the vicinity where theoretically it could go and why it's not being co-located on an existing site.
So I guess the benefit of not being vice president is I'm actually the guy that goes out and does the work. So I submitted as part of this an area analysis where I was responsible, for going out to see if there's any other co-location opportunity. Because similar to before, if there was something that existed that was easy to co-locate on, we wouldn't need to build a new infrastructure. Verizon would just go there. I reviewed the area. As part of my report, I also looked at other properties themselves to determine whether or not if they were leasable and if they would work for a tower there instead. And you'll see in my report that I concluded that there was no other available properties that would meet the requirements here. If there's a specific power line or something you're referring to in the area that you wanted me to check that I somehow did not, we could definitely do that and re-review it. But I did not see anything in the immediate area that was an available co-location opportunity, whether Verizon's there, whether another carrier's there, whether nobody else is there, that could be used by Verizon in order to meet the coverage requirements.
Okay, and I'm just trying to understand, but Homeland Towers builds cell towers.
Yep.
And so are you necessarily going to look for a co-location situation as a cell tower, construction?
Absolutely.
Group?
That's actually my biggest job, because my job basically as an underling is to bring a site area that I've reviewed either on behalf of Verizon because they said there was a need, or something me just driving around sometimes and saying, hey, there's a need here, how can we fix it? My job is to find a site that I could confidently bring before a board such as this and tell you that I need a tower here because there's no other opportunity. If I continually brought sites before boards, which I've never done, and there was an easy co-location opportunity that would preclude the need for a tower, that would mean I'm not good at my job, for one, and I probably wouldn't have a job for very long. My job is to make sure that if I'm going to bring and spend a significant amount of money bringing an application before a board, that it is in fact actually needed. So yes, I do look for co-location opportunities in order to, for example, I don't know if I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but I was asked to go up to Syracuse once to look at the sites, and I was given all these areas that Verizon said they may have a need. And I drive up there, I spend a few days, And at the end of the project, I came back and said, listen, you don't need me. For this site, you can go on this rooftop here, you'd have adequate coverage. For this site, there's actually an already existing tower there, I don't know why you sent me. So yes, I do look for other opportunities, and my job is to make sure that they don't exist already before I bring an application for you and spend my company's money.
So Verizon then contracts with Homeland to look for potential sites regardless of whether it's for construction of a cell tower or not.
Correct. If you notice in the RF justification report that we submitted, there is on the title page a red circle. That's the search radius. Essentially, Verizon figured out that where they need the site is within that red circle. And then it's up to someone like Vincent or any other site acquisition person to go into that search ring and find any existing tall structures that can be used, any properties that are hidden from view that would like reduce visibility. So there was a whole part of trying to make sure we found the best available property for this facility. But obviously, with the local knowledge that's here, if there is a property you feel like we missed or we didn't review, or if there's an existing tall structure that Vincent wasn't able to locate, we'd be happy to review that again. We feel confident that there aren't any existing tall structures that we could have co-located on, and there aren't any less intrusive properties than the one that we've chosen.
And I think the other thing, just to make sure it's part of the record, is there is a coverage map or a gap map, because you're saying that there's this high demand that's being generated. And part of the question is who's generating the high demand. If there's a lot of building construction or home construction or other things going on, is it really in Monroe or is it elsewhere? And this just happens to be a beneficial site because of its elevation.
It's a dual site. So if you notice the coverage maps, so there are a need for filling a gap in coverage as well as relieving capacity in surrounding sites. So a lot of the coverage is in the village of Monroe, the town of Monroe. There is also coverage in the town of Blooming Grove. However, by where we're located, there's a significant portion of the gap that we're trying to create, trying to resolve, being located in the town of Monroe.
So most of it's town of Monroe and south, or town of Monroe centered on village of Monroe and north?
Again, the coverage will go around, but the most of the area in need that we're trying to address is within the town.
Okay.
And that's shown in the coverage maps.
Okay, and I think we could ask the RF engineer
Absolutely.
to verify. All right. So in terms of your appearance here, you had asked whether or not the planning board could use the same RF engineer. Ashley, I don't know, did we get any information on that RF engineer to be able to say we want them to represent us as well?
Previously, you had used them, I believe, with the Barlane, was it?
Was it Barlane? Okay.
And I think that their comments were more tailored for the ZBA because they are the ones that did the seeker and they
Right.
were doing the use variance, but I think it would make sense to have them review from the planning board's perspective as well.
Okay. Yeah, there's a couple that I know, but unfortunately one of the, for me, best ones retired. So, Ron Grave.
Very well. Ultimately, we would just like for the same consultant to be used so that we don't have competing, differing
Understood.
comments. Yeah.
Understood. So does the board feel it's reasonable to use the same consultant as the ZBA is using at this time?
Cityscape?
Yes. Yeah?
I think they were very helpful to us in the past.
Oh,
I'd like to use them again, yes.
okay. Nick, any questions or reactions?
I guess my only, question is, so you're saying with areas that have high vegetation, this tower, if within the zone, like a 2-mile radius, will actually get them on these back roads now with like trees all around us, will actually have cell phone service?
Sorry, I keep stepping on him. It's his job to talk, but I have a problem keeping my mouth shut.
Because the example
yes.
with the hose and the finger over
Yeah.
there, if you're like surrounded by trees,
Yes.
now we're gonna get service.
Yes, and you'll see in the coverage maps, from Mr. Crosby's report, the areas where coverage is anticipated to now exist, and at the dB level, what signal strength is also shown in those reports. So I don't know exactly which road you're speaking of, but, you know, when time comes, and maybe next time it'd be beneficial if we tap into the monitors here so we can walk through some of these things. But yes, there will be new coverage in areas that currently do not have reliable signal. Yeah.
And then are you okay in terms of us using Cityscape, who's the radio frequency engineer that's helping the ZBA with the review on our behalf?
You know, if Jeff's cool with it, I'm cool with it.
Okay.
I haven't been here long enough, so if you guys are comfortable with using that brand, that's cool with me.
Okay. Pat?
I have no objection.
Okay, so we'll use Cityscape then. And then,
Just do a motion to appoint them.
yes, excuse me. So I will make a motion that we retain Cityscape radio frequency engineering consultant to also assist us with the review of this Homeland Tower application. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Noreen?
Yes.
Bonnie Franson,
Aye.
Pat Shea,
Aye.
Okay. So with that, the motion carries. Another motion would be that we declare our intent to be lead agency. So would someone make that motion, please?
Make that
moved.
motion.
Okay. Pat, make the motion. Second?
Second.
Nick? Noreen?
Aye.
Manson,
Aye.
Bonnie Franson,
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
Okay, so with that, Ashley will put
Okay,
together
motion to classify the action preliminarily as an unlisted action.
unlisted action. Okay, so I'll make a motion that we classify this application as unlisted action. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Noreen?
Nick Napoli,
Aye.
Jeff Manson,
Aye.
Bonnie Franson,
Aye.
Pat Shea.
Aye.
I'll prepare the
Okay. Any other action we need to take this evening? And I think it would be best just to get on the next agenda for next month, so we, have had an opportunity to take a look at the plans and the locations, the visibility. If we could get the bare earth images, and then I don't know if between now and before then you could add some more in terms of the topography in and around the site and the driveway, a bit more information. I think that'd be useful. So if you could get that to us, that'd be great. And in the meantime, you'll be working on the whole driveway situation, and we'll be consulting with the fire department. Okay. So I think, yes.
In relation to the topography, I'd like to understand where the tower site is itself. Is that sitting on the peak of the ridge line? Is it, how's the land falling away or rising in and around that? Because I think that's going to make a real significant impact on the overall visibility too.
Absolutely. We include that. And just as a point, though, one of the reasons why we have a relatively shorter tower of 100 feet is because we are getting the ground elevation of the ridge line. That's it's a push and pull where we want to make sure we have the shortest tower possible, but we also want to reduce our impact on the ridge line.
What would be the size of a taller tower then? If
Generally, towers are 150 feet.
Okay.
That's the average size for a tower, but some of these towers can go all the way up to 300 feet. Yeah, it really depends on the topography in the area, the service needs, the coverage that they're trying to effectuate. It's really a technological requirement.
The hills and the valleys here are a blessing and a curse for what you do.
Mostly a curse. If it was Florida, my job would be a lot easier, just to piggyback on that, one thing I do want to add too is, I did respect that this property, when I found it, was in the Ridgeline Protection Overlay Zone. And I think, believe it or not, being here with a shorter tower, in my opinion, protects the ridgeline more than being somewhere else. Because if you were to be, the ridgeline itself is not the whole mountain. It's just the very top of it. If theoretically, and there were no available properties, but theoretically if there were, out of that little district but on the same hill, you would actually need more extensive tree clearing and maybe potentially like an S-curve just to get up to it. So you're going to be destroying more of this mountain and destroying more of the vegetation. In this instance, the area that you're asking about where we're proposing the tower is relatively flat already. And to get to it, we're using an existing trail road to get to the site. So the benefit of being able to minimize, and that's why we're trying to work with the engineer and the fire department to minimize the, in my opinion, unnecessary 26-foot road. Because if we're using this existing trail, we're minimizing the tree removal as much as possible. We've designed the tower to be as short as possible, and we're willing to do stealth options, you know, as you see fit, more or less, that we'll discuss during the VRA. I really think being in this location, using the existing pathway to it, and having a short tower does respect and protect the ridge line. And I'm hoping that once we do fly the balloon, it'll become evident.
And just one more point, if you're in front of the ridge line, you may actually need 2 towers now, because you might have to have one on one side of the ridge line and one on the other side.
Okay. Thank you.
Very much. Thanks.
Okay, as I had mentioned earlier, Pilati Village is not on our agenda this evening. The next item on the agenda then is BJ's site plan. Good evening.
Evening.
So before we begin, we're going to have one of our members recuse themselves. Jeff is stepping away because he's employed by BJ's. And so we will have our alternate step in, who will be voting and deliberating on this matter. All right. Again, introductions and overview.
Bonnie, there are some people on Zoom for this, I
Yes.
believe, so if you want to let them
So
know.
in the room, we have myself, George Lithgow from Jacobowitz and Gubitz. We are the attorneys. Chirag Thakar from, who is the project engineer, and Pat Smith from BJ. So as you know, we're here for site plan review. We are here for seeker, and hopefully we're here for consideration of site plan approval. We have been before you since December. Unfortunately, we took a short hiatus there while we're being appointed, but we believe we've completed the review that's necessary to complete seeker and for you to consider site plan approval. Did meet at your request with the Conservation Commission. It was an interesting slippage of appointments. We started out in July and we wound up the first week in August. But we did meet with them, and I think the Conservation Commission had generally a satisfactory review of the tree plan and the proposed plantings. There were some modifications that we discussed with Mr. Brower, which we are going to incorporate into the site plan, but they're very minor staking and tree specs. Generally, the concern that we heard at the meeting was that they were concerned about the plantings in the conservation utility easement, whether or not species. Ours confirmed orange and rockland acceptable trees are not, there's no invasive species on that. So I think that was one of the last significant things we had to do for you, and we have completed that task.
What's the date of the last site plan submission? Right.
June 29th.
Okay. And did that have the landscape plan? It did. And Karen reviewed it? Yes. And did you respond, and that's reflected on the latest plan set?
No. I believe our comments were, we were having a conversation with the tree commission. Her comments were advisory. They were not related to a code requirement. She was suggesting planting additional shrubs, replacing some tree species, etc. We met with the Conservation Commission, satisfied with what we are showing. We are removing 25 trees. We are planting 42 trees. It's more than 1-to-1 replacement. It's actually 1.7-to-1 replacement. And again, the plan was reviewed by the Conservation Commission.
But yeah, Karen is our consultant. So my question is, are you going to make changes based on those comments? Or are there changes you don't want to make or haven't made based on her comments? So I appreciate that you met with the Conservation Commission about the trees specifically, but overall landscaping, because one of the biggest issues I have is that, again, I'll say I think there's too much being put in that area. I'm good with the BJ's gas station. I feel like we're putting a lot in with adding that additional fast food restaurant in that particular location, not in general, on RD Management's property. So landscaping to me is very important, and Karen does landscaping reviews for us. So is there anything that you're not incorporating that she had recommended?
Just put this into perspective, though. This is an approved site. The landscaping plan was reviewed in 2001. It was reviewed for all of Harriman Business Park projects, and it is consistent throughout the business park. That was one of the findings in the finding statement, that there be a landscaping plan which was consistent and coherent. We are essentially replacing that landscaping plan that exists now with the proposed landscaping. Plus, we are adding some additional trees, and where possible, we are adding shrubs. But is it incorporating all of Ms. Arendt's comments? I think sure I can explain more, but I think the answer is those comments go beyond what the history requires.
Well, I would say that the history is that there wasn't a gas station and there wasn't a fast food restaurant there. And there was a parking area and there was a memorial park. And so to say that it's inconsistent, the whole thing could theoretically be said to be inconsistent because you're putting something that wasn't originally approved. So I'm not entirely understanding the argument there. I think ultimately, we hire a landscape architect so that they can ensure that whatever is put there is attractive, and in particular, because you're putting more there than what was originally approved, the landscaping becomes very important. So I don't know that I've seen an updated landscaping plan, and/or I haven't seen a response to Karen's comments, what is or isn't going to be integrated into the plan.
So I have a pen drive. I have this loaded. Some of the things we can talk about, and some things we can't do. Some things are sort of discretionary, but I can go over this point by point if you want.
One of the things, we can do that now, but ultimately, this should be provided to us in advance, because I feel that often we're going through this at the meeting. But let's do this now, and then we'll...
No, this was the...
You're talking about the plan that we've already received?
The June 29th plan.
Okay.
It's the plan that you already have.
But you'll go through Karen's comments then, and what you have and haven't done? Because wouldn't Karen's comments have come in after that?
Comments were on that plan.
Oh, it was on the June. Okay, so then what you're going to take and what you're not going to take of those comments?
We're going to take the clue from the board, so we can talk about that.
Okay.
And then that's the whole point of...
Actually, before we get into this, we do have the consultants that are online. Are they primarily the traffic consultants? Is there anyone in particular?
That's correct. It's just the traffic consultants that are online.
So do we need to have any presentation by them, or they're just here to answer questions?
I think based on the review that AKRF provided you, the issues have been addressed. There were three things. One was the crosswalk, one was the sidewalk, and what was the third one?
So there were three things
there's three minor
AKRF
things.
had mentioned in their last memo. Everything's been addressed. There were just three items that the planning board needs to weigh in on. That was the need for a walkway between the fueling station and the restaurant, the waiver of the parking spaces, It's a waiver of 123 spaces, I believe, and then the need for additional pavement markings on the gas station site to further channelize traffic and control weaving movement. So those were the 3 items for the board to discuss, but everything else has been.
Okay, so we can take a look at that when we, okay. So what would you like me to open?
714 planning board presentation. This one? Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, that one. And if you go to review letters, and if you go to the landscape review, the 3rd file. First item is a will comply, just she wants me to label some of the. Talk into the microphone, please. So the first comment's related to labeling grassed area and lawn areas as such, which is fine. It's a will comply, it's a simple thing. The item number 2 through 8, if you go to the last exhibit on this list, it's graphically depicted, so saves us from interpreting the words. As you can see, so these trees, there's a row, anything in black is being proposed, okay? There's a row of trees that screens fast food from Larkin Drive. There's a row of trees a very tight row of trees that actually screens the fueling facility from Larkin Drive. Karen's suggestion is about replacing some of these trees with species that she recommends. For instance, it says 3 columnar maples. It's not an addition. It's just, if you could see, the black trees are those green circles are being moved back. There is a drainage pipe that runs underneath where the green circles are shown, where it says 3 columnar maples. You see that text? We simply can't do that. The tree would be over the pipe. Then if you go to number 4, which ties to the comment number 4, and it says replace CR with large shade trees. Well, that area falls within the ONR easement, and ONR allows only certain types of trees to be planted. They're short-heighted trees for maintenance and in prohibiting wires being trapped by the trees, etc. So that comment's related to that simply can't comply because it's beyond ONR's approved list. If you go down to the right of it, where it says number 6 with the light shade by the basin on the right-hand side of the page, she's suggesting we plant some more shrubs in there. That area is an embankment. There's a basin berm underneath it, which is graded, which is on the 629 plan. We can't put a shrub over a berm. There's also a fairly large ONR utility pole at that corner, where number 6 is actually, where the text number 6 is. Actually, there's a leader, and if I could walk up and show it to you.
Make sure you stay on the microphone.
It's this leader. That's the existing ONR pole. So there's restrictions to that. Now, you can see this is all getting planted. If you could pan down a little bit.
In area 6, is it just grass?
Area 6 is just grass. We can supplement some shrubbery, but not the entirety of the green hatch because
it's the
of
berm
restrictions.
to the stormwater
Yeah,
pond,
because
which
this
they're
is
not
the
allowed
berm.
to do.
Yeah, this
But
is
can
the
they do
berm.
shrubs?
We could, well, shrub on a berm because the berm is for possible maintenance. So it's a flat area where you can walk, inspect, put a
Right, no, but
all that.
I'm saying in and around the berm, you could still plant.
Well, yeah, the inside is getting planted.
At the crest of the berm.
Yeah, so in here, you can plant, certainly.
Okay.
There's a storm pipe that comes out, so we won't plant over that. So there are areas that we could plant, but not the entirety of the hatch.
Okay.
Okay? If we keep going down further, these are the 2 trees that she's asked us to add. Not an issue, except that it gets really tight in that area in terms of land mass. But I could accommodate that.
You know what the distance is on center between them? Because you say it's tight.
I can't tell from it because this
Okay.
is not a scale drawing. It's just
Okay.
a graphical presentation, but it looks like 10, 12 feet or something. These are trees that are already there. You can see it underneath it. It's not an additional landscaping. See, they're all there. She's just suggesting to plant a different species.
Are they existing that you're not removing?
No, we are proposing those trees already.
Okay.
So it's not a deficient plan, in other words. It's a
What-
change of species.
Okay, so are you okay with the change of species?
Well-
Species or the suggestion?
We'll take your cue or Ward's cue. Ward's all right with the plan. He's looked at it. He's satisfied with the trees, and they seem to pass his test, except a couple suggestions on the trees underneath the ONR easement, because there's a monoculture, and I said, I'd work with you. It doesn't matter to us. We could replace the species.
Okay, so you can also plant under the O&R right-of-way so long as they're acceptable
That's
plant
correct.
species to them, so you could add and/or replace, as she has recommended.
Well, she's not asking if you could pan up, so we could go, I could just show you where the ONR easement is. So this little plus signs are the ONR easement. So it basically runs along the canopy like that. You can see actually that's the limit. So within this area, you have to use their approved list.
Right.
And Ward's comment's correct. So these are all one monoculture trees. What Ward's suggesting is that swap them out. So ONR has a list of like 10 trees that you can plant. So Ward said, switch some of them out, 2 and 2 and 2 and 2, or 3 and 3 and 3 and 3.
Make it more naturalistic
Exactly. So
in that
there's-
area.
Yeah, so if they catch disease, not all of them get wiped out at the same time.
Right, but when, in speaking with Ward, you're referring to the trees that you're showing there now, that you were showing, never
That's
mind
absolute-
Karen's comments, the ones that you were proposing.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Then layer onto that, Karen had recommended alternative trees.
Yes, so she's suggesting that we
Some
replace
kind of
them with a
shade.
large shade tree, which ONR doesn't permit. So we have to pick from their list.
You have their list that you can
Yes,
send us?
we have provided that to Ward. Yes, I have the list.
Okay, if you could provide it to the planning board?
Yeah, I have a copy. I can hand it to you right now.
Okay.
If we go down, so we can just talk through some of these comments. So it's not the intention of not complying, it's just some conflicts in here that she may not be aware of. In here, she wants to add 2 more shrubs, not an issue. She wants to fill in this area with some low shrubbery.
As green giant, she's talking about arborvitae?
Yes, so we are also, it's basically replacing these with arborvitae.
Okay.
Which is totally okay with us.
Which is probably for screening purposes.
I'm sorry?
For screening purposes?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. And those are the comments. So some we can't comply, some we can comply, but
Okay.
these are discretionary comments. They're not code violations, they're not required by code.
Right.
And we'll
So-
work with her, it's not an issue, but.
Yeah, so we would just want a comment letter, a response letter as to what you can or can't and why. And then the landscaping plan amended as appropriate. You said that you needed our input on several items, so should we bring up a particular site plan to do
Well,
that?
if we can do that AKRF, I can go over that list as well, so it's in
In the same?
It's in the same folder, in the review letter folder. And Ken's here on Zoom,
So this one?
Yeah. And if you go to the last page, the 3 items are, if you just go,
Right, but in terms of, do we need to refer to a particular site plan to be able to see any of this?
yeah.
Okay.
But, yeah, so if we go down the list, so these are the 3 items that are, these 3. And there's commentary provided, so the comments in italics, the response is in normal text. This is the paved walkway between gas station and fast food. CM will work, meaning Ken will work with the board and AKRF to draft a concept plan. Once agreed, the restaurant pets will be revised and reflect the disconnector. So that is that small little sidewalk, literally 5 or 7 feet between the paved area of the gas station and the paved area of the restaurant. So that's the tiny little piece in there.
You'll be adding that?
It's already on the plan.
Okay.
The waiving of the 38 parking spaces, this is the waiver that we were talking about, which is the 25% is permitted by code. We are at 20 and change percent. Considering all the loss of parking, meaning the parking that we are losing as the satellite parking space where the gas station is going, as well as reducing the parking spaces on the BJ's Club side to reduce our impervious. It was brought up by the board last time, 2 or 3 meetings ago.
Is there some kind of easement that's required to be able to have them use the parking that's on the BJ site?
No, we own the BJ site as well, we being RD management, so we can make that change. And BJ has approved that change, so we're just going to go ahead and do that.
I believe there's a shared parking agreement. Is that, I think you've mentioned before for the site? So that's something that
Shared
has to be-
overall for the entire business park?
Our business.
Okay.
We have a lot of latitude, as all the owners have latitude to do with what we need to do, so there's no issue with the REA by removing those parking spaces.
You've asked for that, but haven't received it? Okay.
Well, the REA is, you stop a door with it, it's like 1,000 pages long. It
I think
governs the whole.
just the excerpt of that
relevant
information.
portion, yeah.
Yeah, but we have the right to do it because it doesn't, you can't just look at one piece of it because it refers to this section and that section. You have to review the entire REA. I mean, we know we have the right to do it. We wouldn't have gone down this road if we were going to be violating the REA.
The owner has provided, the owner of the lot has provided you with a representation.
We provided a representation, I guess like 3 or 4 months ago, that we had the right to do that. But we really don't want to get into reviewing the whole REA again. The thing, it's 20 years old. It's been modified a bunch of different times, and it's just we have the right to do it. We're comfortable. We have the right to do it, and we're proceeding. We have the right to do it.
When you said representation, something in writing or represented on the record?
No, it's a representation that was submitted to you.
In writing?
Yes, about
Okay.
2 months ago.
Okay.
We can send it again if you like.
No, I'm just wondering about the parking agreement or the element of it. You know, I don't have to look at it. I don't know that anybody has to, but I would feel a little more comfortable if Ashley saw something.
Well, if you go out there most summers, there's fairs and activities that take place. There is shared parking throughout the business park. And you've actually considered that with your prior approvals. I don't
Well,
think
those were multi-tenants. This is BJ's and a separate fast food, whereas like if we were looking at the iPlace that came in.
both of those are tenants. BJ's is a tenant.
So tenants
and the
of
restaurant will
RD
be a
management
tenant. The
lands.
entities are RD management.
Okay.
And that
So
was-
it's not different from where Target is or where,
Well, Target's actually the only one that is different ownership. That lot that Target is on is in separate ownership,
okay,
but it is subject to the same receipt.
agreement. Is Target sitting on its own lot with its own parking?
Sitting on its own lot, it has its own parking.
Okay.
If there's some activity that takes place, then they have more people come than they have parking on their own lot. They can use closer parking up near the front on either lot.
As part of that parking agreement?
Yes.
So there is I found the letter, if I could, sorry, from May, and it's from FBG Shop Center LLC, the owner of the property. They refer to the reciprocal easement and operation agreement and say it gives the owners of encumbered properties within the Harriman Commons Shopping Center reciprocal easements for access, parking, and drainage in order to facilitate the efficient operation. And they said it does cover this property, and they do give the book and page number that it's on file with the county, so we'll be able to get it that way.
Okay.
Trying to spare the pain.
Ashley likes pain.
I'm not listening.
And the last comment was related to the pavement marking delineation approach in the gas station itself. The response is in the normal text. BJ's is okay operating. They operate 200 gas stations with a similar arrangement. But if the building inspector finds striping is necessary after it's constructed, that would be a condition of approval.
So what is meant by pavement markings delineating the approach to the gas station pump lanes?
So if you could open the site plan, then I can walk you through that. If you go up one folder, yep. And
And I was referring to legal pane
yeah,
or Monroe Planning Board pane.
the second PDF, please.
Which one?
The second one that it says Harriman LD set, yep. Yep. And if you go down to I think the third page, but
I think also in AKRF's comments from July, they had drawn what they were referring to.
that's
They'd
correct.
drawn it, okay.
So that might be the,
Yeah, they had drawn it, and the response was to that letter, and this letter says that the response is acceptable.
So could you
So it's a
indicate where?
striping related to, so if you could follow my pen here, please.
I'm gonna, if that's the area, I'm just gonna zoom in for a sec, hold on.
Yep. So it's a striping related to, it's actually gore mark striping that aligns the car into the loading and the fueling position. AKRF had suggested that it have a little whisker on it like that, so you're channeling this thing in, like the traffic in. BJ's doesn't think it's necessary. It would actually create some conflicting movements because you have only X number of feet to really flow all the traffic out. So, but the applicants agreed that if they build it as shown on this plan, and if the building inspector thinks it's necessary because of efficient operation, patron complaints, whatever, then, that AKRF suggested striping would be incorporated.
So is that in addition to what's shown there, or are those arrows and striped areas actually not occurring on the pavement?
No, they're going to occur on the pavement.
Okay, and so then these are lines that would be in addition to what you have there?
Yeah, this would be like a colored pavement markings.
Like with arrows or actual
Yes, arrows
lines?
would be like you see it on a road striping like that.
Okay,
So it would be painted, it doesn't,
okay.
yeah. So
And then those arrows that are shown once you exit, are those painted, or those are just directional that you've
no,
added?
they are painted.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so
So those
I
are
think
the-
those are the
the three?
comments. Those were the comments outstanding. I do have Sean's letter. George was nice enough to send my response as to how we were going to handle your responses. They were minor comments. One comment, I think that this is this email that George sent this morning. I know you've been out all day, so you may not have seen it. But there were comments that relate to outside agency approvals. You got to go get approval from Orange County Department of Public Works. We need to the board needs to discuss SECRA, those sort of things are in there. There's comment related to getting a letter from or a sign off from the village for the water service, same with sewer. So things of those natures are built into it. They don't really reflect any changes to the plan as such. There was one comment Sean had about heavy duty pavement, light duty pavement. I think it's on the plan. If you go down, I can just show it to him right now. One more sheet down, please, and I can just make the distinction. So it's slightly hard to see, but one more, please, I think. If you go to that sheet, that's the one. think it's number 7. Yeah. So if you zoom in a little tighter, so this is the pavement legend shown in here at the bottom. Okay. And if you zoom out, I can show you graphically where it is. So that's heavy duty, that's standard duty pavement.
I think the confusion, I didn't see any differences.
Yeah, it's because of if you zoom in tighter here, it's because of that gore marking, it's hard to see the darker color. But I can change the color to have it speak out more louder, but that's...
I see it now.
So you can see the difference between the two in here. Okay, so that was one of the comments.
Perhaps, yeah, differentiated a little bit.
Yeah.
More heavier
sure,
screen or something.
For sure. So those were the side of things that were in the letter. There were no real changes to the plan. Sean's reviewed SWIP. There are no more SWIP comments. So I think we are...
As well as the couple items of the conditional approval from O&R.
Yeah, there is, and that's correct. That would be, I think it's in George's draft approval resolution that we would get a sign off from O&R as an independent outside agency approval as such. So all in all, there is really very minor things. I mean, AKRF letter is clean. There's no change as such to the plan. Sean's letter is clean in terms of no further changes to the plan. And to the extent we talked about landscaping, we are literally talking about swapping some species based on Ward's comments and adding some shrubs at the bottom of some of the areas that were sort of hashed in light green color. So our request, I think, speaking on Pat's behalf, would be to get an approval as a condition to all of these things that we would then not have to come back, and we would obviously satisfy the consultant's comments.
So I don't know if we're there yet. Ashley, as far as the neg deck, do we want to go through that, or what do you want to do as far as?
Sorry?
You're getting yelled at. So procedurally, where are we?
So you had started to go through the part 2, I think, at your last meeting, or perhaps the meeting before. You didn't complete that yet. There were a few, I think, items you were waiting on. I did draft a proposed negative declaration based on Mr. Lithgow had submitted an EAF narrative that I reviewed and worked off of that. The one question that I had as far as the neg deck goes was the water from the Village of Harriman. Something in the record to confirm that they have adequate capacity for the proposed use.
Do you have anything at this point, George?
We will be able to get a letter, but it will take some time. What we'd like to do is make that a condition of approval before we get a building permit. Obviously, without water, you cannot get a certificate of occupancy. We certainly don't want to build something if we don't have water. So, I mean, right now the village is just, it's a little bit unusual because they do have water restrictions on outside watering, and they're dealing with August. I spoke to John Lank, and he doesn't think it's a problem, but he does need to take care of going through the chain of command. So,
is it?
That and also, since we don't have a specific tenant, specific user, they're reluctant. They want to know exactly what the water requirements are before they'll issue a will serve letter. That was the response I got back from Tom Cusack over at the village.
that is true. They have done that in the past.
Have done what in the past?
They have declined to issue a will serve letter when we had a pad site, I think on lot 2, that was being approved for Outback, or not, it wasn't approved for Outback, but Outback could not be disclosed. And we had an issue with the village because they did not know for certain who the tenant would be. They wanted to know exactly what the water demand would be, and we could not disclose it because of lease provisions. So I do know that's been their practice in the past. They will serve us. We have a water agreement with them, so we know we can be served. I did attempt to locate it for Ashley, but my office got moved in the last month, and things are not where they used to be. So, but we've been here for 20 years going through approvals. We've always gotten water from Harriman. It's Harriman's water system. we'll have service for this too. But to clear that issue, for now, for seeker purposes, I think it's irrelevant. The seeker requirement for water is 2 million gallons. If your proposed action requires groundwater, surface water, 2 million gallons or more.
That's more for typing of an action. That's not necessarily a seeker analysis.
That's the presumption of significance. 1% is what we're talking about, 250 gallons. So it's not a seeker issue. It is a site plan issue. And a site plan issue that can be addressed by a condition that doesn't allow us to get a building permit until the letter is issued, I think takes care of your concern.
So I would disagree, and water would be an environmental issue, a seeker issue, to make sure that there's enough capacity for that. I'm not sure the 2 million, is there some threshold that says it's not a significant impact if you're under this threshold, or is that just the
Presumption of
the
significance.
typing?
And I would refer you to your code, which requires a water supply report. It does not require a will serve letter. We have the calculations that they've been provided. It shows that we have water demand for the restaurant of 2,500 gallons per day. We have a restroom at the BJ's. I think that is probably 150 gallons, if necessary. That is not environmental impact. It is a site plan question, and that is a fair thing to make sure is checked off as you go through the process, and we will do that.
As far as the form and whether it has to be a will serve letter specifically, I understand, if you don't have the specific numbers, but for the seeker purposes, this board's considering whatever estimates you have given in the EAF as far as the water demand, and they have no way of knowing that the Village of Harriman has the capacity to meet that demand as it's estimated. So if there's anything that can give this board
Well,
confirmation
there's
in that
actually
respect.
one way that you can be fairly certain they will have capacity, which is we have 20,000 square feet of space in the upper lot, which has been approved, which has been built out, which has been occupied at points in the past, which has a water connection, which had water service while there was a tenant. They do not have a tenant now. There's at least that amount of capacity in the system.
So
So,
I
I mean-
know other agencies, like a DOT or a DEC or, just for seeker purposes, not to submit a willingness to serve letter, but just simply to say, we have capacity. Like, do you have capacity for 3,000, even if it's an email or something, and say, yes, we have capacity, to just indicate it's not going to be an issue. I don't think it is, but is there anything, or do you have any emails to that effect from them that, yeah, it looks good, but we can't give you a willingness to serve letter yet?
Never really raised the question because there really hasn't been a question. Let me just go back to put this in context. There's a seeker issue before you. You have a question as to whether to require an environmental impact statement or not. That seeker issue remains open and can be changed if there is new information. We'll provide the letter. We'll provide some form of assurance that there is capacity. We just can't do it tonight. We would like to move forward with this. We have to move forward with seeker to do it. There's no reason, I think, that you can point to that this will require an environmental impact statement for a restaurant. It's obviously a site plan issue. I'm not disputing that.
We don't have a site plan resolution at this point. Is that correct?
You do
George
have
drafted
one for me.
George had one, but I don't think
We've reviewed it.
you've reviewed it, and I don't think we're there.
It follows your form.
So we don't, I haven't reviewed a site plan resolution. We haven't had one in advance that we've reviewed that's been vetted by our consultants or amended by our consultants. So we wouldn't even be able to take action this evening. So why don't we put you, now, we're already kind of loaded up on Tuesday, but do you, and I'd have to ask Ashley and who do we have on the agenda for Tuesday at this point? Because we could, in essence, do the neg deck and the site plan on the same evening, because we can't do site plan now at this point. So that would give you some time, but I don't know if Tuesday is the time. So who do we have?
We have DG,
Okay.
we have,
And so DG is primarily to review the submissions with regard to the ecological,
yeah, their
and then
public
to-
hearing is still open.
and then to make a decision on really the conventional or the cluster layout, so that then they can then proceed one way or the other based on that information. So that's DG.
We have Sherry Torah for the trailers.
Okay.
We have Pilati Village.
They're usually more of a check-in. I don't know, or no new information. That's what I thought. Okay. And then
Owen Drive,
Rye Hill.
Rye Hill.
and Rye Hill.
That would have been 4.
Actually, I had this is the one that I had. DG, Sherry, Rye Hill. That was it. And then we added Pilati. But Pilati's going to be more of a status check. Okay. Okay. Any thoughts on Tuesday? Considering this for Tuesday?
I guess, what would be submitted to the village, or to confirm that there's capacity, or if there's existing capacity that's been approved and isn't going to be used. I don't know if that could be, relied on if.
So
If we can get something
Why
in
don't we-
writing from
why
the
don't-
village before Tuesday, we certainly will.
Why
I'm
don't-
just concerned whether
why don't we
that's-
tentatively, if it's okay, but again, if it's not, if our consultants aren't able to do this, then that's a different matter. I would say tentatively for Tuesday, but something from the village, or if you give me the name of whoever it is that we have to have to get information from, then maybe Sean or myself or someone can reach out to them and talk to them, or Ashley. But I think it depends on schedule, because we don't have a site plan resolution at this time, and I don't want to impose upon anybody and we're all going to have to then suddenly quickly look at a resolution.
Madam Chair, I have followed what I believe is your form. It, for the most part, is a standard set of provisions. There is language which refers to the waiver of the parking. That's a different thing than normal. That's a paragraph. There are 9 conditions, I believe, 10 conditions that are specific to the project. 3 of them are the conditions that are required by the GML. They provide the procedure for the applicant to go and inspect and observe the installation of the tanks, the ceiling, the other things that are required modifications, and that procedure is set forth in the first 3. There's one that deals with the water, one that deals with the
If
sewer.
I could just jump in, I'll be able to review it and get the board something before Tuesday.
Okay, I was going to
And
say,
I
because.
have the draft,
Bec-
and
Because then the
started.
commitment would be to do a neg deck on Tuesday, and then we'll see if we could do the resolution by Tuesday also. So let's commit to that. So you get us something from the water department or someone we could talk to from the water department. We'll act on the neg deck, and then we will see if we could get to the site plan approval as well. Okay?
I will, I'll send Ashley my resolution just to be sure she has it.
I do have it, so I
Right.
do have it and could review it this weekend.
If you have any questions, just call.
Double time. All right. I really, in the best of worlds, would like to see, are all the revisions you needed shown at this point?
They are.
Okay, and so it's just
With
AKRF?
respect to the landscaping, we had asked also for there to be compliance with the tree law. It has a table listing the trees that you're removing and what you're replacing. I know you're doing more than what's required, but there was no listing of what was being taken out and being replaced with. And I believe I had sent you the map note language as well for that's required under the
Yeah,
tree
so
plan?
in general,
It does show the trees being removed, if I could point it out right now so you could see it.
So-
No, actually, the plan shows actually where these trees are.
but
So I
is
know
there
it shows
a
on the
list?
site plan where it is,
We
but
need a
there's no
list.
listing saying what species they are, what's being
Well,
removed,
so
a
we-
table.
And so the reason is because in our tree preservation section, there's actually a fee for removing trees if they're not replaced. And so that has to be quantified and made part of the resolution, so we need that sooner than later.
Credit if we provide more trees than we remove?
Well, I don't know what the exact language is, but I believe you get credit, that's the whole point.
Well, you don't have to pay if you replace everyone.
Right.
is the- You don't get any.
You don't get any money in return.
That
for-
was sort of a rhetorical question.
Oh, you thought you were getting money from us? Oh, Doesn't work that
George
way.
wants to check. I have one question, though. The plan graphically shows these trees, they're actually surveyed location of these trees. Most of the trees are less than 6-inch diameter, which really in your code requires
So it's
only.
only for,
Correct. Most of these trees, and survey doesn't show that, but if you drive, you will see these trees are mostly sick and dying. So we haven't surveyed it, we're not even obligated to survey it, but it's still shown and we are still replacing them at more than 1-to-1 ratio. The only thing that we don't have on the survey is the species of the trees and the caliper. But caliper, you can go check it out. I mean, it's visible, it's the sticks right now. It would take a significant amount of effort for the surveyor to go out and tag each tree and identify species for a tree that we are going to 3 months down the road take it out. So we are not,
You have numbers on them, right?
well, they're graphically shown. I
So
can
it's
just
what
do
you're- the-
numbers. I can do 1, 2, 3,
the
4.
code requires that the trees be detailed as to density and general genus, and identify the number and species of individual trees that have 6-inch caliper at DBH that are being removed. So, and we've discussed this before, so it's not new.
and I don't think we have a
And if
waiver.
there's ones, I understand you're taking down and you're going to replace everything, even if it's less than 6, the 6 inches, you don't have to give the details for those ones that don't meet that standard. I think it would just be the ones that are over.
And as I said, I don't think we have I don't recall a waiver provision in that regulation.
Just clarify, we're going to provide a table which has the tree number, the tree species, and what
Does it have the
else?
genus and the caliper, correct?
Well, we're going to assume it's 6 inches or more, even though it's not.
Okay.
We're just going to give you a table with that list of things. We're not going out there and surveying each location to tell you exactly where it's located.
No, we need, you have a list.
It's
I think
already-
you're saying you have it,
Yes.
but do you
Right.
have it by do you
We
have,
don't have the species identified. That's the only thing we don't have identified, which
Right.
is the species. And it's going to take an arborist and a surveyor to go out there, tag each one, update the survey. Only 3 months down the road, we're going to take that tree out.
can you get a landscape architect
Yeah, I mean, that's
to
what I
go
meant.
there and
That's what I meant.
without having to survey it, but just to get the list together, based on what you're showing as being Xed out?
And it's only for trees over 6 inches.
Agreed. I understand, but yeah, we'll get that done, I guess. Yeah, since they were parking lot trees, we didn't think it was necessary, I think, but if that's what the board needs, then we'll get it.
You may have a plan that shows it since it was all landscaped, maybe an old plan.
Right, we can look for that.
Yeah, we do have that, by the way.
So this is an example of something that we would like, if necessary, to make a condition of approval, that we provide the table, the attorney and the engineer review it before the plan is signed. That, those are typical kind of conditions. So if we're going through the drill and we can do it before Tuesday, certainly we would, but if we
Well,
can't.
actually, usually we get the list on the plan set. So
But what's the purpose of the list?
it's to then come up with whether you are replacing and/or whether there is a shortfall so that there's a fee involved.
Right, so you're going to look at the
So
list when
that's
it
why
is
you do it.
provided, and
But
we'll
as a
pay fee.
matter of practice, George, we get that as part of the site plan set. So, but the,
I think the number of trees is set. We have the tree survey, actual tree survey of where the trees are today. So the number's not in dispute. We are not deficient in our replacements, so fee is not due anyway. I think what George is saying is that the only question to check mark what Ashley just read was to identify the species. But it's, as a condition of approval, we would definitely get that done. It's not an issue.
The idea is that you'll know what's being taken out and then what would be appropriate to replace it with. So if, that's why typically you would have that beforehand. And I think, you know, I understand what you're saying and that you've counted them and all of that, but if it's somewhere where the board could just easily look and see this number, you know, a total, that way everyone's not here counting little.
The total is fine. I can provide that. I've actually provided in my cover letter to the Conservation Commission. We note we are taking out 25 trees because we have an absolute, accurate, definitive survey of where these trees are. You can actually see it on the site plan set. So it's not the question of where these trees are coming out of, and you know.
Right, it's just their species.
And where we are planting is obviously on the landscape plan, which we just discussed a half hour ago. It's just limited to the species of the existing trees. That's all.
So at this point, I think that we're going to aim for the neg deck on Tuesday. Let's see what we need. If we can do site plan, we can. If we can't, then we have to do it the following month. But let's see sort of all the, what other, if there's anything else outstanding that may preclude us from doing that. But as far as neg deck, we just need the water information, from what I understand. Yes. Okay?
We'll do our best.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I have the ONR list. Can I hand it to you? Or is
Give it to Noreen so she can copy it and then send it.
it's two-sided, Noreen.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get your thumb drive. Bonnie will keep it.
I actually did eject it, but I would have kept it. You were right, Noreen. All right, next item up is Rye Hill Preserve, and I have to check quickly to see if did everybody get the most recent version of Rye Hill that was sent to us yesterday? Afternoon. Did the planning board get those? Okay. I don't know if I put them into my system, so I gotta check. Sorry?
Talking to them in Zoom.
Oh.
I was the same thing. I'm like, we can't hear you.
I'm just going to, for a quick moment, disconnect so I can pull up my emails.
George put that one up against the TV, so he's hoping that would work.
Yes. So this is the one that came on 8/9. Have 'em. Jeff is back. All right. So, welcome. Just state your name for the record, and why don't you give us an overview of what's been done since you were last before the board?
I'm Fred Munt with PSS Engineering, the civil engineer on the project, and we also have Jeff Buss on Zoom, who's the attorney for the project, and I'll let him give the intro.
All right, so do you have to unmute him, or do I unmute him? I think you have to unmute him. Hold on. Okay, Jeff, could you speak? We're trying to see if we can hear you.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Jeff Buss here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Is that coming through?
Yes.
George, how's it supposed to come through on the speaker?
I'm getting it through on the headphones.
We're not hearing it on, is it supposed to come through the TV?
Yeah.
Oh, is that speaker on? I mean, that mic? It is on. And it's supposed to come through the TV?
Right.
Jeff, say something again?
Something again? Could you hear me now?
Do you hear that? Is the volume up on the TV?
The volume is up on the TV.
Does he have it up on his computer?
Is it up on his computer?
Yeah, so hold on a second. Can you hear the attorney? You can hear him. Okay, so I think we're good. Okay, did you want to make some introductory comments, Jeff, or the engineer?
Yes, I think Fred Munt is there, who's one of our engineers. And so, because of this connection, I guess I'll get the easy questions and I'll let Fred handle the hard ones. But we made a number of changes to the proposal to try to accommodate comments from the planning board, which we found to be constructive. The most significant concern that we heard both from the planning board, town board, and the community was the mass of the 300-unit apartment building on the top of the Eagle Ridge side. We have abandoned that building completely. And if you look at the most recent set of proposed development plans, you'll see rather than a large apartment building at the top of the hill, that we have replaced it with townhouses. And on the Eagle Ridge side, we have a combination of townhouses and apartment buildings. There would be a total of 214 units on the Eagle Ridge side. And the ones closest to Prestwick would all be townhouses. And where we previously had the second apartment building, the 100-unit apartment building, we've broken that into 3 separate buildings so that they wouldn't have a large mass. Pull it up once again, I think the closest.
Yeah, I think that's actually 4 buildings now, not 3?
4 buildings, correct.
Yeah, okay.
By the way, the reason I'm participating remotely, and I thank you for the opportunity, is I have COVID, so if I'm a little foggy, I apologize, but if you're right, it's 4 buildings. And the closest one now is about 249 feet from Prestwick. And on the bottom side, we're about 300 feet from the property line of anyone on Hawkshurst and probably
think I was going to say, Jeff, I think in one of my comments, I had talked about whether there could be a cross-section from Prestwick over to those apartment buildings because there's a grade change. And we wanted to see to what extent, the buildings sit into the land, and how much of it pops up because you did have some below grade parking. What are the height? What are the number of stories of those buildings now, and how tall are they?
Hey, Fred, can you answer that?
Of course. So again, with the apartment buildings, we're keeping those at the 3-story height. We're going with the flat roof model so that we don't exceed the 40-foot maximum height that's allowed in the CCR zone. So right now, I believe the way that we have it worked out, the really central grade of those apartment buildings down at the bottom of the hill is about elevation 230. So with that 40-foot height, we're coming up to about elevation 270. It's a little bit with you on our virtual meeting. But a lot of the grades along the rear property lines of Prestwick are around the 250 elevation. So there's about a 20-foot difference there. But again, the houses on Prestwick dip back down as you go towards the roadway. So they actually, become a little bit more obscured and are blocked by some of the trees in the area, especially in that 50-foot buffer that we're holding along the edge of the property.
So the 3 stories, is the 74-unit senior apartment building 3 stories, or is it 3 stories and then a garage, so it's 4? Or is that going more into the grade?
The garage is going into the grade.
Okay.
So the 3 stories will be built above that 230 elevation, and then the garage will be about halfway exposed underneath that.
Okay, so you're thinking about, again, it's like 730, right? About 730?
Yes, I'm sorry, I misspoke, yes.
Okay. So if in general, the elevation is around 7, I'm just trying to find a topo line. Here's 760. This is 760, this is 750 in here. Because I guess it is kind of going downhill, but 740, 750. Then the buildings are sitting 20 to 30 feet below grade at the property line for Prestwick. So some of that massing is hidden by that grade change.
Correct, exactly. Okay. And that was really the idea behind moving the apartments. One, breaking up the large mass we had before into multiple smaller buildings, but also moving it from the top of the hill. And actually, in comparing it to the top of Eagle Ridge, the high point at the top side of Eagle Ridge is about elevation 790, a little bit higher than that. If we took realistically the average grade around the top of that ridge, we're at 780. So even at that point, the top of the apartment buildings will actually be below the grade at the top of Eagle Ridge.
Okay. Anything else you want to present as far as the changes?
I think those are it. I don't know, Fred, there was a couple of changes on Shea Meadow to deal with maybe you want to address those, the size of the townhouse units or the spacing there.
I think these changes were a little bit more minor in nature. We had relocated the clubhouse to fit in some of the stacked condo units down at the bottom of the site on Shea Meadows, which actually is a little bit more in line with how the original test case was done a few years ago. Those were mostly apartment buildings down there previously. One of the other changes we made, there's a building, there was formerly an 8-unit townhouse building that parallels Ride Hill Road, which we have split up into 3 townhouse buildings. 3-unit townhouse buildings, I'm sorry, to break up the perceived width when you're looking across Ride Hill Road. I think that was really the majority of the changes over on the Shea Meadow side. Again, the big one is the stacked condos to make up a little bit of density there again by shifting and downsizing the apartment buildings on Eagle Ridge.
Okay, so before we get into comments, Ashley, could you give us a little bit of an overview of then our role and what we're doing here in terms of then our recommendations and referral back to the town board.
Sure, so you were referred the petition and the master development plan by the town board, and you have a certain amount of time to review that and then give your report and recommendations. You review it for, against the criteria that's in the conservation cluster zoning law and the intent of the law and some other goals and objections that it's intended to further. As far as what you're going to ultimately be recommending would be whether to approve with modifications, or deny. And the board also is looking for recommendations for how the plan could be improved to incorporate best practices of sustainable land development. So ultimately, those are your, I guess, 3 options there.
All right, so why don't we, as we normally do, we'll start with our engineers' comments, and then we'll go to the board. And then perhaps I'll bring up the section of the code that talks about the intent, and because ultimately we have to craft some kind of referral back or recommendation back to the town board, and it'll either be, you said approve modifications, or deny. Okay.
So I'll just start with, I apologize, I did not get a chance to review this plan that was submitted earlier this week, so I based my comments on the plan that was submitted by the deadline. So first, in the resolution that the town board forwarded to the planning board for the review, there were 9 items that the town board asked the planning board to look at. I did not see responses to those, and I think I actually had followed up with your team earlier in the week to see if we could get a response to those. Then moving to the section of the code where the town board asked the planning board to comment on, there's 2 different sections. There's one that's our design standards, and secondly, there are advisory design standards. So 2 items from the design standards. First, with regards to parking, just a question to the applicant whether or not, obviously the required parking has been identified as 960 spaces. Honestly, I did not count all the parking spaces because there is, those in the parking garage. So obviously I can't verify that all the parking requirement has been met, but just a general question is, are the garages that are going to be in the townhomes and the parking spaces in front of the townhomes going to be counted towards the parking requirement?
What we're doing at this point is there are smaller width townhomes that are about 24 foot in width. Those units, we're basically looking at a 1-car garage and a 1-car driveway to count towards the 2 spaces required in the code. And then some of the larger width townhomes that are up to 30 feet will be 2-car garages. So we're only counting the garage spaces on those.
So you're not counting the driveway spaces at all, just the garages?
Counting the driveway spaces on the single-car garage townhouses. We can certainly count them on the 2-car garage townhouses as well. It's going to lead to, a large accommodated in those.
And then we discussed this briefly at the technical workshop, but there are limitations for the maximum floor areas for each of the residential dwelling units, and as we discussed, the architecturals are probably behind the civil drawings, but the applicant should confirm that the architectural requirements can be met with regards to the floor plans. And then 3 items for the advisory comments. There is provision kind of recommending against the front-load garages on the townhomes. So I think you've kind of clarified that tonight, that those are proposed. Sidewalks are generally recommended on both sides of the street where there are residential units on both sides of the street, and only on one side when there's either no residential units or only residential units on one side of the street. There appears to be some sidewalk proposed, but not through the entire site. So that'll have to be vetted. And just wondering if there were going to be any proposed connections to the existing public roads with sidewalks. Just another advisory comment that the code generally recommends that the historic resources be kept. In general, that would include the stone walls or any existing foundations, to try to preserve those or reuse those. Then next, I think we've touched on most of these comments already, but during the technical meeting, there were some items that were brought up. I think your revisions that you've made this week tried to address those, so I'll try to skip over most of them, with the exception of the water that was brought up at the technical meeting. As discussed, if you're going to look to tie into the existing Water District 1 that the town owns and maintains, it's highly unlikely that that existing infrastructure will be able to support all of the domestic service that's proposed, let alone the fire suppression that will be required. So just trying to understand what improvements will need to be made to the site with regards to pumping, treatment, or storage on the site.
Okay, understood.
That's all I had.
Thank you, Sean. Ashley, do you have comments?
No, other than the 9 items that Sean had mentioned that the town board referral resolution required to be accomplished before this board completes its recommendation. And I think we did speak to those a little bit at the last meeting. I did ask that there be a narrative provided addressing all of those, and I believe Mr. Buss said he would get that over to you.
Hi, yes. Just as far as those 9 things, we'll give you a written response to those items. Go through real quick, orally for you again if you want, but the first one, constructions to start before August 2025. That's already in the documents. I think it was in before it was sent over. The second one is...
And I guess if I could just comment on that. So I think because there's been a few different renditions now where you had this master development plan set and it was added, the note was added on that, but then what the board's reviewing now doesn't include that. So I think it would be helpful to maybe send over a more complete actual master development plan.
At all. So comments, who would like to start? And actually, I want to note, we've had actually a couple of iterations that have come through, and you could see on this particular plan that's on the screen, there's a red outline. Is that an option for consideration, or is that what you're planning?
It's an option for consideration. One of the things I think that came out of our last virtual technical workshop was that for the townhouses up on the top of Eagle Ridge, it would be nice to have those on sort of a secondary road so that they're not seen and they're a little bit shielded from the through traffic that'll be going to the apartments. So we looked at two things there. One was maintaining the townhouses on the through road because it really allows us to minimize disturbance on the top of the hill there, a little bit less earthwork, tree clearing, things like that. And then the second option in red would be carrying that through road and having sort of a secondary road for all of the townhouse access.
Okay. So who'd like to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
So, I think the job that you did in hiding the large buildings there on Eagle Ridge is very good. It's kind of something that's there, but nobody's going to see it. Knowing how deep that gully is on the other side of Prestwick. I'd like to see you do the same thing on the Shea Meadows. You have the tallest buildings right in everyone's sight line. And if you move those buildings to, well, one area I can think of is you go right to the top of the hill, which is the southernmost portion there where the townhomes are. There's a very steep hill there, and on the other side of that, if you put those townhomes there, you would probably not be able to see them from the road. It's so deep. And that's what I would like to see, is a development that is there but can hardly be seen. There's a development, I don't know what the name of it is, but if you're at McDonald's, on Still Road there, and you're going towards KJ, you get to the a red light. Hidden Creek. That's really hidden. Yeah. And that's what I'd like to see. If this ever comes to be, that's what I'd like to see. To the extent possible, I'd like it to be totally hidden.
So in other words, for instance, I'll attempt to draw a box here. So in this area, for instance, that's like the lowest area because it's going downhill. So rather than having townhouses up in this area, instead, could they actually accommodate, let's say, townhouses? This road would maybe shift up and then have the townhouses on this downhill side. So now you're removing them from the frontage.
I think that the lowest portion, or the lowest area where they could be hidden.
Right here?
Completely, yeah, right in there.
Okay.
And it's the further south you go, the more the gully is in there. It's a very deep gully there, much like there is on Eagle Ridge.
Pat, are you referring to trying to move the stacked condos into that area, right? Because I assume on Shea Meadows, those are the tallest.
Yes,
they're 3 stories, and the
correct.
townhomes are 2 stories?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
actually swapping out the townhouses here for the stacked flats.
That's correct.
Okay. And then I think there is the potential to, and again, I don't know from a road design perspective if it works, but, could they actually put some townhouses down along this line? Because then again, it's downhill at that point and farther away from the homes that are on Rye Hill, if it's possible. Okay, great idea. Anything else, Pat?
No, that's all.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, before I get started on my questions and a couple of comments, Jeff, again, I just want to mention, so we received this most updated MDP on Tuesday, which gave us very little time to take a look at it, and we had received kind of a detailed 5-page memo narrative from you dated July 28th, which spoke to the numbers behind the project and also sort of addressed the issue of, does this meet what was examined in the test case. So that's the memo I had plenty of time to take a look at, and I did. But my comment about receiving this on Tuesday is, if we get to the point where we're taking this through a site plan approval process, and we're receiving late-breaking addition information like this that we don't have, we're always going to be a meeting behind with this project. And, I don't want to see that with any project. So we've just got to receive stuff with enough time to give it a fair look, both for your purposes and of course, for the town's purposes. I kind of went deep in the weeds on your 5-page memo, taking a look at all the numbers and comparing that both to the CCR law and the FEIS, particular to the test case, to really examine your argument of that this met both of those things. By and large, I found that the numbers support that. Things like, you have 245.48 acres. So the way the calculation works on number of units, 491. I checked the bedroom count. I tabled it all out just like you did, but, to make sure that that matched up as well. At the bottom of page 1, there's a paragraph, Shea Meadows will now contain 153 townhouses. Previously it was 191, 96 of which will be 3 bedrooms, and 56 of which will be 4-bedroom units. But that works out to 152 units, not 153. So I just ask you to be careful with stuff like that, just to make sure we're getting the most accurate numbers there. I took a look at the calculation. So comparing 154 acres of open space and saying that's 65% of the total acreage. Well, if I do the 245, well, if I do the 190, sorry, the 54 into the 245, 48, I came up with more than 65%. And also looking at 91 acres of developed land, I came up with a 37% on that as opposed to 35, and so I guess I came up with 63% of open space. So again, I think we just need to check those numbers. Either the acreage isn't quite represented accurately or the percentages aren't. But that's crucial because for the CCR zone, we have to be at that minimum of 65%. Understanding, of course, that there's wetland areas that won't be developed as well. But as far as what's going to go under conservation easement, one way or the other, I know that has to be the 65%. In looking at your description on how does this MDP meet with what was studied already under the FEIS, I found a lot of that seemed to check out. I too have a concern about the source of water. I mean, that's a big concern overall, and I think we need to see something that demonstrates that the water supply is there for this project, that it's there for the construction, and that it's there for the people who are living there. There's going to be quite a number of residents, and I don't think we've received anything in any of the submissions that have really demonstrated. You keep talking to the water supply is going to come from the town, the water supply is going to come from the town. We need to see something that shows that the town can supply that water. Point number 9, talking about the disturbance. One of the things that's always important to us with the planning board is when we're looking at a plan, what are the limits of disturbance? So we're going to want to see that very distinctly in what we're reviewing as far as what's going to be cleared out, what's not going to be cleared out, what will go untouched. I was unclear looking at the numbers about the site-wide FAR, but I see on your latest submission, you've got a whole table calculating that out, and you're slightly under what the FAR requirement is for CCR. Having taken a quick look at the MDP since it was submitted on Tuesday, this is my preferred layout for the apartment buildings of what we've seen so far. I'm back and forth on the townhouses on Eagle Ridge. I understand the benefit of putting in an extra roadway to keep some of the traffic out from in front of the townhouses and that sort of thing. But that involves the repositioning of those townhouses a little bit closer to the existing homes in the area. It also, I imagine, would lead to more coverage of the ground to do that. It's just more roadway. In looking at that option with the red buildings, the road that would divert through the townhouses connects on both ends. And to really keep extraneous traffic out of there, if that's indeed the purpose, it might make more sense if that was a cul-de-sac of some kind, where the only real reason to go down there was to go into the townhouses, and if you were coming out of the townhouses, you're headed back out of the development, more or less. I don't think you're going to see a lot of traffic between the residents of the townhouses and the apartment buildings. People aren't going to be driving between those units a lot. You know, friends will be made, you know, things will happen. I think it's fairly walkable, generally speaking, and it might be important to put through bike access or pedestrian access between the townhouses and the apartments, but not necessarily a roadway. We can minimize some of the ground coverage that way. So those are some of the things that I was looking at.
Thank you. Nick, do you have any comments you want to offer?
You know what? No, not right now. No.
Okay. Do we have Steve on this? Are you on or just for BJ's? Okay, thank you. All right, so some of my comments are, we appreciate that you've been working to reduce the scale of the buildings. Primary concerns are anything that's going to abut one of the residential neighborhoods, whether it's Rye Hill, Prestwick Gardens, you know, Hawkhurst. We need sufficient space between the development and the neighbors so that we maintain their privacy. We don't want them to have to really look at the development. As a general comment, again, we just received this, and as a recommendation, I would say that I don't think that the town board should make any decisions based on the information that's here, because I think that as a kind of as a master concept plan, there's other information that needs to be shown to guide the planning board ultimately. If there's a water tank, if there are trails, because there were supposed to be trails on this, if there are sidewalks, I think there need to be the basic bones and framework of the project for us to be guided by. Or otherwise, the town board, in any decision it makes, if it does approve this, has to let us know that it's giving us the flexibility to make those determinations. In general, we're looking at boxes. At one point, we had looked at buildings and elevations and what these would look like. And again, because we're moving things around and breaking up building massing, et cetera, I know that you don't necessarily have that. But I would think that the town board should get something to look at before they make any decisions of what ultimately this will look like.
We are working on that currently.
Great. Because I think buildings still have to be articulated. I think, you know, we don't want flat boxes. And that's, you know, again, I think something that should be submitted. I think on your maps, and for the record, you should make sure that any of those connections to Prestwick Gardens, they've been indicated as being emergency access only. And ultimately, whether you can or can't connect to those, to Prestwick Gardens, I believe Prestwick's in the Village of Monroe, and that has to be explored with the Village of Monroe. But at a minimum, you know, it's been our understanding that they're for emergency access only. In terms of the townhouse configuration, while I agree that it's adding impervious surface area, ultimately we have to consider both the neighborhoods adjoining this and to what extent this would be impactful, but we also have to consider the environment that we're creating for the people who are going to live there. And so from my perspective, you know, if I was living in this development, I think you're going to have a lot of traffic going back and forth to the apartment buildings. And so in the best of all worlds, but one that doesn't necessarily, again, start to impact Prestwick, I would like some kind of sort of, you know, ring road or some other way of accessing those townhouses as you show in the red. Could it be cul-de-sac? Does it need to be all the way through? I don't think so. That might help minimize some of that disturbance if it's just this cul-de-sac connection, which you had suggested. I think we need to see, even if they're conceptual, I think the town board should see some kind of general floor plans, because I think it's important to know what really, again, to verify the bedroom count, because, I've seen models, we've all probably seen some homes, newer homes, where they show 2 bedrooms and a den, 2 bedrooms and then a study upstairs, and it's easy to pop a closet in. So, the water demand, the sewer demand, the parking demand all relates to bedrooms and people. And so it'll be important for the floor plan to verify that, in fact, the estimates are reasonable based on those floor plans. So I think that'd be important to provide to the town board. As a general comment, while you've calculated the parking, and it's really for the buildings, for the residents, I don't know that there's sufficient area for visitor parking. And so whether it may have to be some, maybe parallel parking in spot locations along access drives, or little, pocket areas with some visitor parking, especially in townhouse developments, because you have all those driveways fronting to the road. You don't have this length of road to be able to, to park along a curb. So I think you really need to consider where you can actually put some visitor parking in here. The clubhouse area, there might be some opportunity, because I think you're providing 24 spaces for each of the clubhouses, but that's not necessarily that close to all the units. So again, I think that needs to be built in. And I don't know if this can be done or how it could be done. I know you're dealing with a lot of grade, but we're running that road that goes back into the apartments, parallel to, again, the backs of homes at Prestwick. And I don't know if that road can come in a manner that it's not running parallel like that, to the extent it is. If it can maybe follow that grade a little more so there's less of it, I don't know, it's a question. Having said that, if there has to be a road there, then I think some consideration needs to be given to how to minimize any impacts of the road on those adjoiners. So whether it's a landscape big berm, with plantings on top, something that's going to both mitigate against noise, lights, again, visual intrusion. I think that interface needs to be considered, and it'd be really useful on this concept plan to show conceptually some of these mitigation areas, or protection areas for the adjoining neighborhoods. So those are my comments at this time. I will take a look at it. We do need to get our thoughts to Ashley so she can write a recommendation. Yes. Sure.
I think this is mostly a question for Ashley. And so in relation to CCR in general, I mean, this project, of course, but I'd like to understand a little bit better, when land goes under conservation easement, when we've been talking about that even in relation to regular cluster zoning, how perpetual is that? Once that conservation easement is placed, does that depend in part who holds the easement? Would it make a difference whether it's a municipality or something like a land trust? Can those be changed down the road in the future? Or once that's in place, it's going to protect this land forever? That's what I kind of want to get a better concept of.
The intent is that it would be in perpetuity to protect the land forever. The actual terms would, of course, depend on who's going to hold it. I believe the way this law is written, it has to be either the town or someone that's acceptable to the town, and the town will be able to dictate, what those terms are as far as preventing future modifications of the essential protection.
So would the easement be written in such a way, or could it be written in such a way that prevents, if it was held, say, by the town, that would prevent future town government, once there were changes in attitudes or perceptions in changing what had been done at that time? Would it continue to be protected in that situation, or could a newly formed government down the road, again with different priorities, undo what had been done?
The idea would be that it would be in perpetuity.
I kind of need this answer. I appreciate it, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I believe it could be crafted in such a way, but it's going to depend on the terms,
crafted.
And I could also, look into that a little further to see if there is some possibility of changing it.
We talk about conservation easements a lot on this board, and it's something that we've kind of prioritized looking at. I thought it was important with this project, but with a lot of our projects, to understand how that works better.
It's usually a layered approach. So, for instance, you could do deed restrictions. So then it's enforceable by everybody in the development, number one. Then you put the conservation easement on it. The easement has to run to someone, and that group, it could be the town, it could be the Orange County Land Trust, but an organization that you believe will not, that will continue to exist and continue to protect the resources. And I don't want to say just right off the bat, every trust organization is the best. It really depends on the details, because I know of one organization at a national level that flipped some conservation property in a town near us because they took it, they sold it, and they used the money to purchase land somewhere else. And so they then didn't protect the land that everybody expected for them to protect. So that's what I mean, the devil's in the details, to make sure that this is the land that gets protected. Another layer may be that if this is actually the open space also designated as parkland, to be able to alienate it, you actually have to go to the state legislature for an approval. So, again, another layer. So I have seen in some condominium developments, one down in Rockland, in Suffern, where everybody expected this common area that was like a pool and some lawn area. It was just part of the development, and it was open space. And somehow the developer still owned that area. There were no deed restrictions. There was nothing in the zoning or approvals that said it had to stay there, and more townhouses got built. So I think those are the things we want to protect against. If this is part of the regulations, then having multiple layers to ensure that it stays what it's intended to stay in perpetuity for future, generations.
Great, thank you.
The law does require, I believe, deed restrictions as that added layer, so.
Right. So just in the way, a recent application, there were owners who were able to, bring forth, a dispute and say that this is not allowed per our deed restrictions. It's incumbent upon the people who live there to do the same as well, in addition to all the other layers. So, Ashley, next steps.
Next steps really discuss your recommendations in order to report. That I know there were those 9 items that needed some clarity. Those will have to be addressed before you could actually issue your report.
So when we talk about clarity, is our recommendation, so for instance, if we think we need floor plans, is our recommendation that the town board should review floor plans before they approve the CCR? Or are we saying that we want to see the floor plans before we issue a report? Because I know we're working within a time frame, and so at this point, I don't know if we're establishing a whole bunch of recommendations that help the town board in making its decision.
Those more technical aspects, if there's something that you feel you need to see in order to make a more sufficient recommendation, something to, I think, speak with the applicant about, that if you feel that, you know, there needs to be this additional information, otherwise it will be a recommendation that will require probably a lot of technical items that the town board likely would want your input on.
So in that instance, if we make it with a whole bunch of recommendations for technical, it may come back again. And is there a right or wrong, or is there a preference? Because we only have so much information right now, and I didn't know, again, whether the expectation was that we were going to refer this back to the town board and then make it discretionary on them whether they send it back to us again.
The process doesn't really...
Jump in, it comes back if we get the zoning approved to you for the site.
But yes, that, I mean, that's understood, that we're going to have site plan authority over it and we're going to review it in detail. But this is even we're talking about the concept. Whether we think
Master development plan.
the master development plan, if we think that there's additional technical detail that's needed before the town board should consider it, do we do that as part of our recommendations, or do we ask that for now? I think we do it as recommendations.
Either way, and I think it depends on whether the applicant wants to supply that to you beforehand or wants to do the recommendation route and then come back if the town decides to send it back.
Okay.
My understanding, too, with our role at this point was both to make a recommendation on what we recommended the decision be, but also all of those things that we suggest that they take under consideration before they make that final decision. You know, many of the things that you just kind of listed as things that we would feel are important, I think all need to be a part of that recommendation to the town board, that at this point that we're saying these are things that we're considering and we think you better consider it too before you make a final decision on that.
So I think it's going to be two areas then. One will be, you know, we have to recommend whether we would approve or approve with modifications or deny. And I guess the question is, do we even have to make that if we think there's additional information that's needed? Or we could say approve with modifications, but I think there should be an overall caveat to all of this, is that the applicant is holding at 491 units, and to me that's a max. And whatever our recommendation is, it should be clear that, you know, we're not saying 491 is it. It's that you've shown us 491 units, so that's what we have to make our determinations based on, and that, you know, based on our review, we would modify in many ways, and that might result, or it could include reduction in units.
My understanding is that CCR sets that number through calculation. You take gross acreage, and for every half acre, you get a unit.
Well, and the question is, but that's a density calculation, so
Yeah.
usually density calculations are, that's your max. I don't know that it's your number. So that's a general question. I don't know if you are guaranteed that amount, or if, you know, it's, again, it's just like we're doing with Pilati, or, you know, or if it's, you have to prove that you can accommodate it, whether it's water, sewer,
right,
et cetera. Now, they did a GEIS, so they do have more data on this particular site than we have for Pilati, so that's why we're so much more involved with that one.
Density, it's a maximum, so
it can be less.
Mm-hmm. And you could recommend.
I would just say, you know, a caveat is that in meeting all of these design objectives, you know, the planning board acknowledges that one option of getting to an optimal layout is also to reduce units, and that, you know, the town board will look at alternative layouts and ultimately decide what the number is. So I think that should be kind of part of anything that we recommend. Feel that you have, so we've had a lot of comments here. Do you feel like you can condense them into both a combination of technical and substantive?
Yeah, I think I would need some direction on the ultimate,
Approve
Conclusion.
modifications, or deny? Because that's specifically what we have to do, one of those three. Any thoughts? Any reactions? What's your recommendation? I mean, we're making this actual determination on Tuesday, but to help Ashley draft this, we need to give her guidance. So I will say it's not, I wouldn't say approve. I think there are modifications needed to the master development plan to achieve the objective. I guess I wouldn't say deny because it's going to be modified. So, and it could result in fewer units. So I'm not there either. So I'm in the middle, for lack of a better term, and ultimately we don't make the decision anyway. It's the town board's decision. We can only say that to me the recommendation is that it needs to be modified some more. But Jeff, or
Modified and vetted. Modified and vetted. Modified and vetted.
Vetted.
Vetted. Yeah.
modify and vetted.
And just to comment on what the point of the master development plan is, and this is in the code, it's to allow the town board and the petitioner to reach an understanding on the basic use, mix, density, and layout prior to determining whether to lay out. So those use, mix of types of different housing, density, and layout are really the key things that would be set by this master development plan. So if there's certain things that you think in those categories, or if there's certain areas where you would want, as a board, more leeway, that if it's, showing 491, that the planning board would, be able to recommend design changes that wouldn't necessarily guarantee them at that amount, that would be something to mention.
I agree with you. As an overall concept, I'm generally in favor. I do think that there are maybe some further modifications that we need to see. I don't think we're quite there yet. Frankly, I don't know that we have a final layout yet. I don't think we're set on a master development plan quite yet.
I would agree.
That's
why I say it's not an approve.
Right. I think how the townhouses ultimately are considered as far as positioning and how the road will go, whether it will go through the townhouses or not, needs to be decided. Very interested in Pat's comments about the location of possibly realigning some, if not all, of the stacked condos on Shea Meadows to take advantage of the topography like you've tried to do with the apartment buildings. So I think those are all things that need to be dealt with. I think the comment about a berm between the road, first of all, repositioning the road if possible, but using a berm to protect against light, noise from that road, even visibility. That may be a suitable suggestion for the townhouses on Eagle Ridge as well, between there and the existing properties.
Right.
We've seen that used to effect in proposal with DG to try and hide visibility. And the more space you have in the periphery of the property, the more you can take advantage of things like that. Whether it's landscape, with trees, with berms, things like that. That'll really help protect the existing neighborhoods and what's to be in the future. So,
thank you.
Hey, Bonnie, do we have like a traffic report on this and all this stuff? It's all been formulated?
So we're not... So there's a generic environmental impact statement that was prepared, and it evaluated this site in its totality, but it had a different layout. I believe the unit types and the mix, one of the things they have to check is that the trips are still the same, that where they exit are still the same. I don't know if that's been done in terms of the traffic. Because if we're moving units around, we're moving trips around. And, are more units possibly exiting onto Rye Hill as opposed to Orange Turnpike? So that's another question.
But in the same vein, in broad brushstrokes, the traffic layout is similar to what was done under the test.
Right.
One of the things that we had asked and recommended was there were originally a proposal for 3 exits out onto Rye Hill. We asked that be minimized to 2, particularly because there's so many driveways on Rye Hill, and it's a tough road to turn onto in general. So feeling that 3 exits was not recommended, and that's what we've got here. The positioning of the exit out onto Orange Turnpike is roughly where it was in the test site. So yeah, I absolutely get what you're saying about the shifting of units and population amongst the sites. There may need to be some fine tuning, but I suspect that the general recommendations would wind up being the same. A 4-way intersection, Rye Hill, Mine, and Reynolds, taking a look at the possibility of a traffic light for Reynolds and Orange Turnpike. I don't think we're going to see major changes in that. I'm not saying it's not warranted to look at further to the ability that we can, but
I think it's more order of magnitude.
Right.
If 500 trips were predicted during a peak hour, is it now 800 or is it 510? So I think there needs to be, and I mentioned this, like a matrix that does all these comparisons between what the GEIS evaluated and how this project may change that, whether it's water, sewer, trips, et cetera.
So going to the municipalities now, I mean, I was getting letters from Neil Dwyer this summer about, optional conservation of water. So are we really going to be in a drought when it just seems like environmental sabotage, you know what I mean? So, I mean, it's obvious.
Well, I think they have to be able to be provided. Either they have to provide the wells and they have to make proofs with the hydrologic analysis, or they have to get it from a source, and that source has to have capacity. I don't know where, if it's tying into the village's water supply, the village has to make a determination that in fact they can provide that water. And frankly, that probably should be done as part of the concept plan.
Yeah, it should be done first.
Yeah.
I mean, if not, we might as well be proposing Disneyland, right there, instead of, we could propose anything. But without the water, it kind of...
Agreed.
You
Yeah.
know?
So this is all, so we're not the seeker agency, the town board is. So we as a board need to point to, so I'll add 3 things: substantive comments, additional technical information, but also seeker. And I think that we have to include a category that says, before you consider a decision on the rezoning, what is the current status with water? How is it being provided? Are you going to get approvals for it? If they're in a district already, they may be entitled to it, period. If they're not in a district and they're not entitled, are they likely to get, added into the district? Are they allowed to use it, or might they have to get alternative?
Vital details. There's going to be a lot of waste coming out of there.
Yeah.
So just, we should get these details before getting even the public all excited about.
Well, and these are, details that the town board has to get for its decision.
But again, many of these details for this particular property, for what is materially a similar concept, by the numbers, were examined under seeker as part of the EIS process when the CCR regulations were put in. Things like water need to be updated, although it was only a few years ago. Things obviously have changed. I think, again, understanding materially...
Excuse me, please don't call out.
I think understanding materially, are the traffic counts similar to what was examined? And those are things that we need to point to in our recommendations.
I know a lot of people that have moved out of the city because of COVID and because of inflation, so our population has probably grown
Well, I
Last
can't,
year.
I mean, speaking for the town, we haven't seen that many development applications in the last 2 or 3 years, so they may have, there's housing turnover for certain, yeah, and there are people selling and buying, but we actually know to what extent there's been new development. In the town, not so much. There's certainly been projects in the village that draw potentially from the same source. Yep. Do you have additional comments?
No, that's it for now.
Pat?
So the two most important things to me are when you're coming up Rye Hill Road, you can't see the development, or to the maximum extent possible, it's hidden. It's there, but it can be positioned such that it's almost invisible. That's one thing. The second thing is the conservation easement. To the extent possible, in talking to the town board, find the most foolproof way to make sure that some future board or even town board cannot change it.
Agree. So I definitely think that was discussed, and that should be part of the recommendations. Jeff, you raised that as a question. I think the relocation of units so that they're not visible from Rye Hill, that they're in the hollow, as you said, if it means switching them around, I think that needs to be addressed. The road, as a general measure, I don't know that 50 feet is enough of a setback. I think in the best of all worlds, I would like at least, twice the height of the closest building. So if the closest building is 40 feet, I'd like to see a setback that's at least 80 feet. So I think some bigger setbacks for any of the buildings that are close to the neighbors. That alone won't guarantee it, though, because if it's just brush, you're still going to see it. So the recommendation is, of course, very robust landscaping, where the setback alone won't address it. And then again, the overall caveat that we're looking at 491 units. We've been looking at reconfiguring 491 units, but an option is to reduce the total amount of development on this site. Anything else? No. I do want to say for the audience that's here, we have gotten the emails. We're provided with them. We read them. We consider them. We're not the decision makers, but we appreciate them. And some of our comments, consider your comments that you have provided us with. Ultimately, this is the town board's decision. It's a legislative action, and it has to land. So we are advisory at this point. If they were to approve it, then we get involved in the full-blown site plan details. And I think, again, as part of a recommendation, it would be important for the town board to say what we can and can't change. Whether it's reduction in units or, moving things around, we should understand from the concept master plan, what's within the planning board's authority, because we do look at it in more detail and we may find something that maybe it has to go back to them, that they have to make a change. That's often what happens with master development plans, that if we find something that has to change, we go back to them and say, we think this needs to change. But some mechanism for that if it's not in the law.
Just a comment too on the conservation easement. So I looked at what the CCR law requires, and it's either a conservation easement on the open space that's held jointly by the town and a trust agency, or it's dedicated in fee to the town. So that gets into the parkland question that you would be.
Yeah, I know the project in Tuxedo, the land that was given by Related, the open space, it has deed restriction. It's owned by the town, and the Orange County Land Trust, I think, also has an easement over it. So there's that layer, the three mechanisms. And then again, if it's referred to as park or open space, then it would take an act of state legislature to alienate it. Yeah. So I think, again, that kind of layered approach, four-prong, is the best for protecting everything that's supposed to be open space. Anything else? So I guess Tuesday, we'll take this up again. We'll take a look at recommendations. And probably after this, we should talk schedule. Because Rye Hill was always on our schedule, BJ's wasn't. So if it takes a lot of time to put some recommendation together, then, you know, maybe we do the neg deck and, you know, I'm going to leave it to you, Ashley, whether there's sufficient time. Usually we're not supposed to do this, so I think we're making an accommodation, but if we can't do it for BJ's, we can't do it. So that's my feeling. Okay, thank you. Any questions? You'll be back here, Jeff, and you'll be back here for Tuesday?
So that's correct.
Okay, Jeff, you might not be here because you have COVID, right?
Yeah, if I get a negative test, I'll be back.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then I think if there's any other details, we can always shoot them over to Ashley. But if we do, we really should get them tomorrow so that there's enough time to incorporate anything.
My whole weekend.
All right, thank you. And thank you, members of the audience, for being here. We really appreciate it. And, you know, there'll be a set of recommendations that you'll see from us, and then our ultimate recommendation as far as approved modifications or deny will be part of that as well. Thank you. All right. Let's just maybe a 5-minute break. I think we're at the end of our agenda. I think we only have minutes, right? So if you all want to head out, you're okay? Did you guys review? Sorry, we're still in the meeting. Did y'all get an opportunity to review the new minutes, or should we do it on Tuesday?
Fine with me to, whatever you want to
do. Did you review it, or would you like to wait till Tuesday?
Do whatever you guys want to do. It doesn't matter.
Pat, any preferences? Minutes tonight or minutes Tuesday?
Let me flip a coin.
Okay. Huh? Tuesday? I know, it's getting long.
I second Tuesday.
Second Tuesday. Is that Tuesday? Okay, Tuesday. So you wanted Tuesday? Oh, okay, I couldn't hear you. Guys, we're still in a meeting, so thank you. If you would take it outside, if you're going to chat. Thank you. Okay, no, I can't hear. We'll talk. Again, any comments to Ashley? So let me just bring up the agenda. So are any of these minutes coming off because we didn't have a quorum? Then we are safe with these. Okay. I just want to make sure. I don't want to end up reviewing something if we don't.
I'll double check on Monday because I'm not in tomorrow.
Yeah, and we need an updated agenda anyway, so if you could send that to us on Monday?
Yeah, I'll do Monday.
With the additional items? Okay. You know what, maybe talk to Mike Morgante, because really if it's only a status meeting, you know, does he really need to show up?
Okay, I'll ask him.
Yeah, ask him. You know.
Not a problem.
Okay. And you'll be here again on Tuesday for BJ's? Okay, great. I should have asked, because if you can't be here, that's a problem. So, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm not sure if they can right off the bat jump into something or an approval resolution.
No, they need to get sworn in, and they're not going to be able to be sworn in that night. And so they can come and sit on Tuesday.
Probably September would be more realistic.
Yeah, it's going to be one permanent and 2 alternates.
Right, but if there is,
and then Steve will be leaving us and going back to his full-time ZBA.
Please, could you keep it outside, or? So for any reason you can't, then let us know. Okay, perfect. All right. All right, with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, thank you. Second, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any abstentions?